Okay, at 6 o'clock on October 8th, 2024, I'll call to order the meeting of the village board of trustees. Roll call.
Bell.
Here.
Berto. Here. Champo. Here. Park.
Here.
Houston. Here. Werner. Here. And Orozco I have not heard from.
And a motion to approve the agenda by Houston,
Second.
second by Champo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, comments, correspondence, concerns from the public, and this would be for non-agenda items. We'll have a chance for public input for the CIP later on. So is there anybody that would like to speak to a non-agenda item?
What?
Non-agenda item that's not on the agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to know what the debt is of Sister Bay. I reviewed the budget of last year and you're very unclear at what your debt is.
So at this point, this is not, this will be public or, you certainly can look that up and keep that for you, but it's not on the agenda, so we can't discuss that right now. That will be relevant as we talk about the CIP on the agenda. So that portion of it we can
Alright.
certainly discuss. Yes,
Okay, so to be clear, so if it has to do with the capital improvement plan, we should wait to speak of
Yes.
it later.
yes.
Okay.
Yep, that way staff can talk and you can get some information before you have questions and.
Is it?
Okay. Then we did get some late correspondence, Heidi.
Yes, this today rather, you received emails or letters from Rodney Hadeen, Andrew and Simi Warfel, Ellen Goodrich, Betty Anderson, and Bridget White, all concerning the capital improvement plan and budget for the next year.
Okay.
Did everybody get a chance to see those in their emails?
I did not see the Warfel one in mine, but there's also a few other emails, so. Let me make sure.
Can those be read at the time we're discussing the CIP?
You'd like to, yeah?
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay. Then to. Is there anybody in Zoom who would like to speak on a non-agenda item? Okay, I don't see any hands. Okay, on to item 5, working session discussion for 2025 to 2028 CIP plan. So that, you want to take the lead on that? Do I hand that over to Alan? or-
Sure, the chair has that, or the village president has asked me to just do a summary highlighting some of the things that are in the CIP, talking a little bit about the capital improvement plan. So I'm just gonna read some notes I have, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Adam from Baird, who will actually walk us through it so everybody understands what's in the CIP. It might answer a lot of the questions or provide more information. So I'll just start with, as capital improvement plan notes, this plan is a tool that we use to plan how and when we are going to pay for infrastructure, tangible services, equipment, and vehicles. This allows us to stretch needed projects over time and plan accordingly to make sure we can afford them. The current CIP does not result in a tax increase. And uses bonds, the levy, some grants, and user fees to pay for those items in the plan. As I said, Adam from Robert Baird and Company helped us with the CIP, and he is here to answer the questions, any questions that we might have. Vlad Yannick, our finance director, also assisted in the preparation of the document and is here to answer some questions as well. So with the plan, we forecast what we need, how much it will cost, and how we're going to pay for it. Since this is a 5-year plan, every year the specific item in the plan moves up a year as years pass. So we keep looking at it every year. What was year 2 last year becomes year 1 this year, and so on. So it keeps rotating. As stated, none of the projects will result in a tax increase. I'm not going to summarize those items for 2026 and beyond. Rather, I'll just cover the larger items that moved up and are now planned to be addressed in 2025. So the Public Works building shows up in 2025, and it was actually approved last year and is currently being built this year in 2024. But you see it in the plan because we complete the building in 2025. Same with the village broadband project. These items are funded with municipal bond proceeds. You saw a renovation for the village hall. It was contingent on receiving a grant. Without the grant, that project does not move forward. The lowest cost of our 4 items for 2025 in this part, or the administrative part of the budget, is for a new administrative building on the former Lagerquist property. Many of you know, last year we purchased that Lagerquist property. It was not a loan, it's something that we own outright. And in the CIP we adopted last year, we proposed the new administrative building be built in 2025. Although it shows up in the current CIP again, we would not begin paying for it until 2026. This project too would use municipal bonds. We also have money set aside to install sewer and water on a portion of the former Wiltsey property. This was approved for 2024, but did not happen, so it has been moved to 2025. This is to be funded with bond proceeds as well, and we are also trying to get a grant to leverage those dollars to be able to do more with the funds that we have. We also try to repair at least 1 road a year and have budgeted money to repair 1 or more of the roads in the B2 zoning district west of Bayshore Drive. That's kind of behind the Husbys, that area there, often known as the Triangle. This is funded in part with Premier Resort Area revenues, tax revenues, and the remainder with bond proceeds. We have money in the plan for a trail, which we received a grant for, trail planning, and playground equipment. There's also $1.5 million set aside in the plan to set up a fund so the Friends of the Ice Rink can begin a fundraising campaign. This is not paid with bond proceeds, but with capital levy or tax dollars. The marina proposes to rebuild our office. That project is to be funded with user fees and not taxes, and will be backed by general obligation bonds if needed. The only other change that we have that was not in the CIP and it doesn't affect 2025 is last night the Parks Committee did approve a road being added to the CIP for 2026. And that would be for some work that has to be done on Flint Ridge. So with that, Adam, I'll turn it over to you for some specifics on the CIP and get into some more detail.
Yeah, so I'll kind of do the same thing and focus really on 2025, because I'm assuming that's where probably the majority of the questions are going to be kind of out tonight. But then just kind of go over the process. So really, we started the process. So I'm Enrico with Barrett. I was brought in to kind of assist the team on looking at the former CIP that was put together, and then trying to put together this CIP so that it could be brought for you tonight for kind of consideration and discussion. So really what we did is we got together with the staff and looked at the previous CIP, and really spent kind of the month of August kind of going through that and making updates that came not only from the staff, but from obviously the various committees, commissions that obviously make up the village. And what we kind of came up with then in the month of September was the draft of the CIP, which then went through the finance committee, where they had an opportunity to kind of look at it, weigh in on kind of some of the questions, look at particularly items that they felt should be kind of moved, and then essentially they gave kind of the green light for this to be brought forward to the village board to kind of start the next process. Again, this is a plan. So what this is trying to map out for you is looking at all of the projects and potential, items that need to be addressed in the village. If you were to take them all on in the years that they're indicated, how would you do that? So I'll kind of start with 2025. So in 2025, essentially to kind of summarize it up as best as I can, there's about $22 million worth of potential projects that could be taken on. That ranges from everything from general government administration, streets, parks, the ice rink, the marina, the fire department, public works vehicles and equipment, the wastewater treatment plant, collections, water, and then obviously the library. So how all of those essential possible $22 million in costs are potentially being proposed to be funded is through various sources. So in your budget every year, you have what is called the capital project levy line item. So that is specifically from the taxes. There is an amount that essentially is budgeted every year that then goes into the capital improvement plan. So what is being proposed for 2025 is just over $1 million. So $1,089,000 would be capital project levy. So that is specifically going to be in the taxes that are levied on all the property owners, would then automatically, that amount would go from the taxes into the capital project fund to cover that. Then there's about $25,000 that essentially is general fund levy. So what that means is in the general fund budget, there is a portion of $25,000 that essentially would be budgeted for that then would go into the capital improvement fund. The main source of this is obviously going to be bond proceeds. So as Julie alluded to, there's about $16.1 million worth of potential bond proceeds that would happen. So if that would go through, that would occur in 2025. And then what would happen then is we would then work as the municipal advisor and on mapping out what makes the best sense for the village in regards to those bond issues. Does it make sense to delay some of those principal and interest payments into future years so that, again, we can kind of levy everything in so it isn't such an impact to the taxpayers? Or does it make sense for some of those projects to actually have them start having some type of payment occurring in 2026? The goal, obviously, with any time we do bonding is we always try to, again, limit the amount of an impact that it can have on the tax rate, because what we don't want is ebbs and flows where you have, a huge year where all of a sudden your taxes go up and then you don't do any, if you don't do projects, then with your levy limit worksheets and kind of calculations, it goes down because your debt, you're essentially the debt that you're levying is what is able to be used to kind of keep your tax rate steady. So you don't have kind of ebbs and flows. So the less projects you do, the less debt you take on, that's going to impact your levy limit. The more debt you do, obviously it's going to have the same effect. So those are all things that we kind of look at. As Julie alluded to, there's about $5 million worth of grants that have been proposed throughout the 2025 CIP, which is in relation to park projects. Also, I believe that is the Village Hall, if I remember correctly. And then there are a couple of others. There's the Premier Resort Area Tax. There's about $355,000 that has been proposed. Historically, that amount that has been taxed has always gone to a road project. So that is slated to do the same thing in 2025. And then there are other sources of funding for about $565,000. And what that is that is directly related to what is considered to be your enterprise funds. So that's going to be your wastewater treatment plant, your collections, your water. Those are all enterprise funds. So they're essentially going to give money to the capital improvement plan to cover some of the projects that are related to those areas. The ice rink and the marina are another one of those. They are kind of have their own separate funds. They have their own fees that they collect for their projects. So we are anticipating using some of that and some of the reserves that are out there to kind of cover those costs. So that is pretty much kind of how we came up with these numbers. And then we do the same thing kind of for 2026, 2027, 28, and 29 is we kind of estimate right now out, okay, out of the projects that are there, what potentially makes sense that's kind of capital project levy, what potentially makes sense as bond proceeds, and are there any kind of grants or other opportunities that are out there to kind of form that? So I guess this is where we'll open it up because I think that would make the most sense. Is if there are particular kind of departments you want to focus on or questions, we then as staff can kind of go from there.
And just to clarify, so basically, 1,100,000 is what directly affects the taxpayer.
Correct.
So everything that we're doing in 2025, that's what their taxes are paying is $1,100,000.
Yes, so that is specifically what you are putting on the tax levy that then decides what is going to be the mill rate. With the bond proceeds, what will happen there is any bonding that you would do more than likely is not going to have a principal and interest payment in 2025, and that's what we have calculated right now. Is that anything you would be doing, for bonding, if you went out to do a project, you are not going to see that hit the levy until 2026 or potentially later. There are some other maneuvers that you can do where what it's called is it's basically capitalized interest. So we build that into the bond. So when you go out for the bond, if it's, a $3 million project, but there's going to be questions about whether or not you can make any principal and interest payments in the first few years, we can then try to calculate, okay, what would be needed then to cover until there actually is enough flexibility in the budget to start making those payments. So those are all things we kind of look at as we go through that. But what we generally try to do is you would not have a principal or an interest payment in 2025, and then essentially in 2026 would be the first one. But that would be something that, as this is in the plan, that has to be approved by the village board. So when we go out and actually do that bonding, we'll have a better understanding of whatever project it is, whether it's, Village Hall, whether it's potentially Public Works, blah, blah, et cetera. You're going to go out for, bids. So you're gonna have a better estimate then at that time of what particularly that cost is. It could be more, it could be less. So then that's where we work then to try to figure out what makes the most sense. And look at kind of structuring then those debt payments in future years to be able then obviously to fit into the budget and to the strategy that you are trying to do as a board, and obviously that the village is trying to do as a whole.
I'll open up to the audience.
So you basically have 22 million of debt in bonds.
No, so
No,
there's
the
22,
bonds-
the,
no,
bo-
the
right.
bonds are sold, but that's how much is covering the debt.
So the bonds right now, what would be estimated is there's $16 million worth of bonds that would cover $16 million worth of
Are they
projects.
long-term?
Yes,
All of them are 25 years, 20 years?
so general obligation is 20 years.
20 years.
Correct.
No short-term.
No,
So everything you do is long-term, and there's 16 billion that people have bought.
that
Who's
was,
buying the bonds?
so it goes out to investors, so it's a variety of kind of different individuals, so it could be firms, so for instance, like Barrett as a firm can go out and purchase bonds. Actually municipalities can go out and purchase bonds, so there are some municipalities that will kind of leverage their existing capacity to go out for that. Or it is, it's investment companies, it's banks. So generally what we try to do is we go to all the local banks first. If it's an open market, we let them know that it's available.
What are the interest rates?
So that depends on kind of the market. So right now we've been getting anywhere from, low 4%, 4.04 and even under. It just kind of depends on where that is. And that's where, when we get to that point, whenever they decide to, if the village decides to go out for something, we kind of will then look at the market, kind of run it and determine what that could be. There's a lot of factors that play
Oh, I
into
know
the
that.
interest rate. But yeah, right now we've been seeing, one of the advantages obviously for the village is within the last 2 years, your bond credit rating has actually gone up twice. So that is a credit not only to the staff, but to the board and all of the policies and procedures. And also this roadmap is one of the things, the CIP is one of the things that investors look for, is they look to see, okay, are you road mapping what the projects are? Are you doing everything? So that has a drastic impact then in the ability of the rate you just talked about. So right now the village is in a very good position. And I think that's going to be coming up later when you're going to be talking about kind of what happened today with some of the issues that you've been looking at. You are getting a very good rating, where right now, I think the one was 4%. There was another one, I think that was just at 5.
0.25, I think.
3.78 and 5% were the two that you got, which right now in today's market is pretty good, considering that banks are a lot higher.
So if you have this project, they're saying 3 million and it does need more money.
Mhm.
You could do more bonds, I don't see this project coming in at the.
At $3 million, you're talking about the administrative
Yeah.
building?
Yeah, it's no way it's coming in at that.
So that's where obviously it'll be a question for, the board, is what they're gonna have to do is if they get to that point, they're gonna go out for bids. And they're going to ask essentially construction companies to, look at that. And that's gonna depend on, there's a lot of factors that are going on right now. Everybody knows there's a hurricane going on in multiple places, so that plays into construction costs. So those are all things that we look at, and what we'll determine is if, potentially $3 million, it comes in more, we'll rerun the analysis and look at what that means. Because that all is going to play into obviously a decision that the village board then is going to have to make is, do they want to go more? Does that mean then potentially the project is going to be done in phases? There's all things that we look at. Obviously delaying projects has an impact as well. As you know, is we've run into we've seen that in the market where there were plenty of municipalities. I used to be an administrator in a bunch of different places. When we were looking at projects in 2020 and we did them in 2022, they were double just because of the way it was in the market with inflation and everything else. So those are all factors that we look in. So yes, does the village have the capacity where if the project would come in more than $3 million, could they take that on? Yes, they could. Their debt capacity does allow for that. You're at about 60.
It's Minnesota, though.
So right now you're at about 64%, 66% of your total debt limit. So you're allowed 5% of your equalized value to be in debt. So you are at 66%. So right now you've got about 40% of capacity where you can take on, particular projects. And every year, the village is paying off that, paying off debt that's already existing. So that number goes down, and every year your equalized value tends to increase based on the market. So you continue to have capacity. But those are all the things that we look at, as you allude to, where if the project came in more, those are the discussions we would have to have, is what does that mean if you take that project on? Does that have an impact on other ones? And et cetera.
Mike?
Well, I see the
I have a
vote.
couple of questions. First off, I appreciate the analysis. My name is Mike Laskowitz. I live at 10873 North Bay Shore. And I appreciate the fact that the board has improved our debt rating and keeping our borrowing costs down. But what concerns me is that the operating expenses of the village continue to rise, and the debt service is skyrocketing. And the non-operating expenses are now, the debt service and the non-operating expenses as a total percentage of our budget are like 45%. With this kind of borrowing, because we're borrowing, I mean, we have to pay it back, right? So just because the model says we can borrow more, doesn't mean any of us in our own lives would do that. You have to manage your money carefully and understand that there are things that could change. We benefited greatly from the revaluation. That helped us a lot. It could go the other way. We're a resort town. There's no assurance that we're going to continue to see the valuations go up. I looked at the data that you guys had prepared, and there is no factors for risk moving forward. I talked to the analyst that was here the last time. So
Sure.
my nervousness is we're spending more on debt service. We're borrowing more, and we're increasing the capital plan significantly. And that's a dangerous proposition for a village that is this small. And I'm afraid that we maybe over rely on the Baird analysis, because your point is clear. You provide us with advice. The board makes the decisions on the spending. The board makes the decision on how much risk to take. And we have to make sure that that's understood by the whole village.
Sure. So I guess the response I would say as far as risk is when we do our analysis, we are basically going as conservative as possible. So I'm sure when Justin was here last week, he talked to you, all our estimates, when you're talking about equalized value, we go with a 2% increase every year. Within the last, if you look at any municipality, you guys have overshot that a lot of times, but there's other times, just as you alluded to, where sometimes it may be 8, sometimes it may only be 1. So we try to, again, look at as much risk as possible and be as conservative in all of our analysis when we look at your debt, when we look at everything, because that's the thing. We want you to be able to ensure that when you're making the decision, you feel comfortable that you can do it. And that's what we try to do.
So you're Andrew?
Yeah, I'm Keith Weedy from Woodcrest Village. I have a general question, and apologies if it's a naive one. How does adoption of a 5-year capital improvement plan relate to approval of specific projects? Are those separate decisions that happen later next year?
Yeah, so I can answer that for you. So your capital improvement plan really, it's a plan in itself. So what happens is it's a part of your budgetary process. So when the board essentially adopts a capital improvement plan, you are not saying that you're going to spend every single thing that is in here or do everything that is in here. But what this is for investors, and especially for the reason you do this is for a lot of the grants that you go after, is when you are applying for grants, they want to know that specifically you have a plan in place when it's going to be occurring or when you're estimating it for it to occur, and that there's been backing from the community essentially to look at these projects, whether that's the board making that decision or that's the community saying, for specifically all the items that are in the park or the ice rink or the marina. Those are items that are obviously necessary for a tourist community to continue to have those amenities that attract people to come here. So what the CIP does is essentially it's a roadmap. It's to show you, okay, here's everything that's been identified. What happens then as the next step is in the budgetary process then when this is adopted, that then is basically they take what's in 2025 and plug it into your budget. In some years, you may be able to do everything that's there. In some years, you may not. And then that becomes a question then that goes back to the board, where as staff, they will come and say, okay, here is essentially where we're showing how much we can spend in capital improvement this year. That may be if you have 40 items in whatever year you're in, you may get to 15. So now it becomes a conversation for the public and also the staff and as well as the board to consider, okay, what then are we going to do? Are we going to do these 15? Are we not going to do any? That may be a possibility. You may delay that. And then with that comes the continual conversations of you've got 5 years worth of projects. Now, every single one of these projects is has a reason, has a rationale for why it's being done. It has to be ranked a certain way. Some of them are more priorities than others. If you continue to push them on in future years, you now continue, that list keeps growing. So then it's a matter of, okay, what then do you start tackling? What do? You know, your equipment needs to be replaced. You know, the staff is going to, you know, look at it every 3 years should be the goal, is if it's equipment, whether it's a plow truck, fire truck, those type of things, they all have certain, you know, finite windows of when they feel it should be replaced. The more you kind of kick that can down the curb, the more it creates a problem. So in a perfect world, your CIP is adopted, that then goes into the budget. You see where that kind of shakes out, and then you keep rebuilding this CIP plan. Because if there's items that weren't, just as kind of Julie alluded to, there's some years they plan to do this. You know, there's $16.1 million of proposed borrowing. May do that, you may not. If you don't, then it becomes a question of, okay, what happens to those items that weren't approved? Now you come back in the CIP process again in August and you start it over again and go, okay, do we still have that as a priority? That's a question for the board. That's a question for the community. It's how much you want to try to tackle and what you feel is that right, amount where everybody agrees and passes the budget.
There's been a lot of assumptions that 5-year plan has been agreed upon. But unfortunately, people don't find out about stuff till after the fact. Land was bought. And it seemed to surprise everybody. And then I see the word shift. You shifted to back to another project because you got rejected.
What are you saying was rejected?
Well, I don't know. It just seems like where it says the plan began to shift in 2023. The village put, then you have to review. I don't know. I get the impression you're determined to do these projects. And when the public tells you you don't want to do them, you just shift things around and call it a different name, put it a different place. And I don't understand why we need a building that big. I don't understand why you want to move the firehouse. Why do you, and believe me, you've got an atrium bigger than a lot of the cottages in this town.
So that plan, the
So
village admin
you're,
has not made it, that plan has not come to the village board yet. That is still just came out of parks and has not come to the village.
yeah, and why did what does the park committee have anything to do with the administration building?
Parks, properties and streets. So it's part of the village property. That's the form that the committees take.
Park facilities.
Facilities.
I don't know. I just see that you're
But
I just
this-
kinda
this
see it.
Tonight is about getting public input. But Dick was over here, I see you.
Yeah.
Dick Burrows, Mr. Bay. My question, as parts of this discussion, capital improvement as opposed to cost of operation. And you made a comment, sir, that we're thankful for the increase in valuation. Not all people are thankful for the increase in assessed valuation. That awful lot of residential peoples. I came to this, I think it was this meeting last year when we were holding a late meeting on the budget.
So Dick, let me just, one moment there. That was the budget meeting. This is the CIP.
Right.
They're very close and they're intertangled, but it was a different meeting.
They were talking about CIP issues that evening, and they were talking about what was, and I was surprised, and the comments were made in that meeting by board members. That as evidenced by the number of people at the meeting, it was clear that the community was satisfied with the spending that was supposed to take place. Last year, there was significant increase to this budget. You talk about the moving forward, sir, in the next 2 years, that there wouldn't be an increase based on the spending base. It's kind of like the father who spanked his child and then said, for the next 2 days, you're not going to get spanked, and you should be thankful. It's a little ironic. The question I have is really, are the decisions in CATS? We're going forward with the Parks Department building. We're going forward with the administrative building. We're going forward with the major projects. And several people that I've talked to said, where did the discussion go about moving the fire station and relocating everything in this building? Administrative, we would put the Parks Department in this building over on this side, we put the administrative in this side, we put the post office when it comes time over there, and the fire department would move out here and everybody would be happy. And the comment was made that the administration in the building is not happy with that proposal because it doesn't suit their needs, which I'm not sure what that meant, and maybe that's not even true. But the question I have is the horse out of the barn? Are all of these projects moving
Parks.
forward?
The Parks building is moving forward, that's already happened. I think the other item on here is broadband, that's part of this CIP 2 for 2025, those have happened. The other are not set in stone, I mean, that's something we have to adopt tonight. So this is, what people say tonight is gonna absolutely influence that decision, at least for me it will.
So the 5-year plan that we talked about is cast once it's.
I would say like the Parks building is moved along, that debt in here, that's happened, we've committed ourselves to that. That horse is, so to speak, out of the barn. The
Okay,
broadband projects, same thing, that's how decisions have already been made in the past. The other items have not.
I tend to agree with the comment that what's disingenuous in this whole spending proposal are the costs of operation. I mean, the costs to operate these new buildings, the size that they are, will be significant. The infrastructure will be significant, and I think you're underestimating by a fair shot what these, and I will just bet my children that in 5 years, we will not see an increase in our taxes based on these projects. It's just too hard to believe. Thank you.
Raise your concern, I mean, just to be clear, I suspect it's both, but I just wanna make sure, you're saying operating expenditure for these buildings, you think they're just gonna take that much more to operate, or you think that the budget for them is just for constructing them is?
Both. I don't think you're ever gonna collect enough parking violation monies to pay for these moving forward.
I just comment on the fire station proposal. Just a comment on the fire station proposal. So what the village did is they pursued a facilities plan. And that looked at, what buildings should we proceed with? Where should they go? There was discussion about having some of it on this property here. But after they had the public meetings and interviewed people and had the public, they had public input sessions. That's not what the public wanted. So it was not decided, it was decided not to put them on this property. So,
Well, I'm just curious about that, and a follow-up question, if the public didn't want, then I think it was Denise who commented that eventually this building would move to Woodcrest, which is probably the next logical move, but if that was the logical move, this building that has more than sufficient space for the Parks Department, separated space for administrative, and drive-through for the post, what was not acceptable to whomever? And how large was that study? How was that facilitator study?
Can I answer part of that? Okay. So the post office will not move here. They will not move this far off the main drive. If the post office is difficult to deal with, finding the right person to talk to, but they did say that next to the library might be a possibility. And Julie actually has been talking to somebody
at the federal government.
at the federal government about their wishes, that parcel. We did do a walkthrough on the needs of the administrative staff and the park staff. And although this building looks like it could satisfy the needs, it simply can't. It will not function in the manner in which is most efficient for each department. And so and there would probably have to be some major remodeling if we did do that. And so it was decided that we should just look at building new, build for the future. And that's something also that this building would not do. If we really had to do it, could we make it work? Sure. But it would not be a permanent solution to the needs of those departments.
I think the other thing that should be said is that the village board has not really discussed a new fire station. I mean, like, as far as it's known, it's like, at some point, 20 years from now, we might need to do something. So to look at this as an asset we could repurpose. You know, I don't think that would make sense, but also the village board has not had that conversation.
I mean,
There's
the
been a
fight,
couple things that have been talked about, and that's one of the reasons we get to lot of this property is to keep those options open, but that is far from a settled matter.
right, and, I mean, our fire chief is here and he can speak for himself, but when he was interviewed, when we were doing the facilities plan, and I don't know if I'll remember it all off the top of my head, there are certain criteria that will dictate them moving out of this building. One is at some point in time, if they have to go to a paid full-time staff. One depends on where the growth is, because the fire department wants to be in a central location with a really good 5-mile radius. Am I right so far?
Sure, would you like me to?
Sure, do you want to finish that?
Right.
Okay.
So Chris Heck, the fire chief, I live here in the village, so a couple things. As part of that facility study, I was interviewed, and what I said was, if we were gonna build a fire station today, we could not build it here. Right? I think you've all tried to get in and out of the intersection down here, right, by job. 21 years ago now, when this building was built, the village didn't look like it does today. We didn't have the growth, didn't have the traffic, right? So the question was then, where is the best place to put the fire station? Geographically, the best place to put it is the corner of Maple and Woodcrest, right? Because we serve the village and the town. And we have to draw strings 5 miles in each way from that point. And the best geographic location to serve the village and the town with the southern station is at that intersection. So we simply said to the villages, if you're going to buy that property, please understand that at some point when we have the discussion to replace this building, we need to plan for a fire station, right? Failure to plan is planning to fail. We are not saying we need a fire station today, tomorrow, or even in 5 years. I don't know when that will be. But when it happens, we can't afford to, when we built this, we went through 5 different proposals of property. We bought a property, we cut down all the trees, and we were stopped, right? There were a lot of things that happened after the fact because we were trying to be reactionary instead of planning ahead. So we're asking the villages to plan ahead, right? Nobody's saying we need a new fire station today. What we're saying is we need to dedicate some property for the future in the correct place, right? And when we get there, maybe that is no longer the correct place, fine, we can sell that property. But if we don't hold that property, or at least draw a circle around it, we're going to lose that opportunity, right? That's why we talk about the fire station.
So Chris, my question would be, when you're going east, Maple isn't a better option than Mill.
It's not a better option, but what will eventually be a better option is when, and you've all heard me preach about it, is a route around the hill.
A route around the hill would mean, that's annexing some property that's away, but anyway.
No, it doesn't take an annex, it takes a development or a developer that says, we're gonna tie this through.
Yeah.
Right, and we've had those conversations with different landowners up there, and eventually, I hope, and Dick can speak to it better than me, he's been in these positions longer than me, how long have we been talking about we need a route around the hill?
Well, and that's precisely getting back to Denise's comment. The biggest issue in this village right now is not buildings, it's traffic coming in on Woodcrest and Maple. And that is where we should be setting our priorities. We have over 100 large construction trucks coming in on Maple and Birchwood every day into the heart of the village, trying to make that hill or downtown. Until we get something on Woodcrest that brings us around to 57,000. And so that's why I look at this building and I said to myself, look, when people suggest that it's not applicable or it's not available or it's not malleable to a village building, I said they have to build their meetings in here right now. There are 6 or 7 offices that they could use. There's 5 bays down here with 4 bays in each direction. And I said, I really expected, and I'm sorry, being on these boards is very difficult, and I appreciate the work that you've done. But it almost feels at times, and Julie will disagree with me, but the work is done in silence and then made in the back, decisions are made in the back room, and that's not fair. But to tack 3 large buildings onto this a village of 1,200, and I realize we're not a village of 1,200, but we are. And there are certain things that are acceptable to most and some that are not, and this is an awful lot to bite and chew.
Back there.
Tim West.
No, I'm sorry, she was here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll get to you.
Go ahead.
My name is Nikki Mustardi, a resident of Sister Bay. A year ago, I was privileged to be on the Parks Committee for a while. And we spent many hours discussing plans for the Wiltsey property. At that time, our direction was from the resident study, survey, and the housing study that was done by many people from Sister Bay as well as Door County community. They spent hours and hours trying to find a plan for, low income housing and putting the spot at the Wiltsey property into something that the residents wanted. Incorporated in there was walking paths. There was a place for all the administration buildings there. All the administration buildings were gonna be in one place. And in addition, it would be very easy to come and go from, close to central. So there were a lot of hours of people's time spent on this, and actually our tax money was spent on consultants' opinion as well. So I'm a little puzzled, like where and when and how it happened that the plan changed to put the administration buildings to the Watercress property. It seems obvious that some of the residents' opinions and preferences are maybe put aside and discarded. And it doesn't seem like we're always fiscally responsible. It seems like we keep on asking to spend more, and who's gonna buy, all our bonds? Can't we just like put a stop on things for a little bit? Let's see where we really are financially, fiscally, see what the priorities are. I love hearing about, new trucks for the village, or things that we need for maintenance. Whatever happened to talking about updating the Sister Bay Beach playground equipment? It gets so much use. Also, we had talked about making it handicapped accessible. I asked people to attend tonight, and their response was, what's the point? We come, we give our opinion, and then the board can come and go and do just what they want without really taking it into our, what we gave out to them. I don't know, it just feels like sometimes, all of this spending and decision-making is not financially responsible and really disrespecting the residents.
Yes, sir.
Tim West. I live in Sister Bay on Mill Road. What I'm listening to is really interesting. Dick, good point. Chris, fire protection is the utmost. The question I have is, how can the board be disjointed from the Parks Department? Because all of a sudden, we're hearing all this stuff, and I don't hear anything that says we are unified and we know what we're doing. The question comes up is, if we need a new fire department and it needs to go on Woodcrest and ZZ, how are you going to do traffic control? Traffic control on Mill is terrible. We see more ambulances and fire departments going past our house, going to Woodcrest, and then splitting because they can't get through near Chatham. Why don't you close off some of the parking spaces? Why don't you open the road up and say, whatever, and get those ambulances, fire departments there? Except you can't turn left from May till November. And I understand that. And we are in a tourist town. The question comes up is, what is more important? A fire department with millions of dollars of fire equipment, or a village hall that needs to be replaced? Oh my Lord, that thing is atrocious where it is now.
But the Parks Department puts out a plan that says, oh, geez, here's our meeting room. It looks like a Congress room with a big dais and chairs. Well, let's see, I think that has more than these people here. And then you have an atrium. Great. Boy, that is just shows progress out in a hinterland where nobody's gonna see it. Then you have no kitchen. You have meeting space for people, Lions Club, looking for a place to meet. 70 years of support, millions of dollars of donations to the various areas of Sister Bay. And then you sit there and go, oh, we're gonna make this grandiose thing. Well, it's not you, it's the Parks Department. So who is to be called on the carpet for this?
So I guess we're, okay,
So my question is this, you're going through all this, you're gonna look at the CPI or the plan, whatever it is. And the question is, are you gonna vote on this building tonight? Are you gonna vote on 2025 to build this building? Because have you looked at the plans? Have you looked at the traffic impact on it? Have you looked at the people's impact on it? Have you even asked people, the community, what they think about it? No, because you are abstaining from it because it's the Parks Department. Thank you very much.
so it's not the Parks Department. This has a matter to do with timing. I mean, there are 2 members of Parks on the village board. There's actually 3. And next week, that plan will come to the village board. So it just happens to be, we happen to have this special meeting ahead of it. So I understand what you're saying, and I'm not saying it's the Parks Department. This is the village. The village board makes up many committees, and there's other committee members part of there. So I understand your frustration on there. I would say that particular item is timing. Keep in mind, the CIP is the broad brushstrokes of saying this is what we plan to do. Now, that is what will get voted on tonight. As much as we would say is, we're going to commit spending on these projects over 2025, we're not going to, we don't get into the detail of the project until it's further on. This is general plan.
Got it.
So, but that building will get discussed. This just happens to be, this is a special meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I do just want to add to just a comment on the building. So we did do a facilities plan. And that was done in last year, and that's when different plans were presented to the public. It was actually in this meeting, this room, and then I think the village hall as well. And there were several meetings where they actually had poster boards of what the building could look like and everything like that. That's when the public actually spent a lot of time on the design of the building.
Nate?
Yes.
Can I say something? I just wanted to respond to Mickey and tell her that there is some seed money for the waterfront playground equipment in our budget for next year of $100,000 working towards that all-inclusive playground.
What about the dog park?
What about it?
It needs to be fixed. There's holes all over the place. It's uneven. You have low spots where there's big puddles. It is in bad repair. It needs fixing up. Take a walk over there and look at it. Walk through it without
Parks
tripping.
chair is there every day, so she knows the condition of it.
You know, I know.
We know each other. Mhm.
If I could respond just a bit.
Sure.
I wanted, certainly the gentleman, that I went, Tim West, my name's Louise Housen. I'm Chair of Parks. And I've been Chair of Parks since April. As Chair of Parks, I want you to understand, because it is a little weird. It's a little weird that stuff goes to Parks first. Agreed. But it is what it is, so like it or not, right? So when Parks is responsible for buildings that are built on village property. So the administration buildings going on village property. parks buildings going on village property, stuff like that. It starts there. And different municipalities organize it differently for whatever reason, and there's no, but that's how we do it. And so this came before Parks. I was elected in April, and my first meeting was end of April as chair. And so we did take a look at it, and there was a discussion about, took a look at the plan, and there was discussion about the size of it and what could be done to minimize that. And the location of it on the old Lagerquist property as well. I have to say that our administrative staff deserves and needs a better working facility. They deserve a better environment, certainly. I will say that I would agree that it could be smaller, but that's not for tonight. It's been discussed, and it was discussed at Parks, and it was decided at Parks that it would move forward. So here we are tonight. And so when Dick asked the question about, is this in stone? It is not. I still believe that we definitely need one. Whether it happens in 20 or 25 or 26 is not in stone. And also what it looks like or what we spend is also not in stone. But, and I know that's a little confusing with, you know, why things go the way they, but I do want everyone in the audience to understand that we do communicate. I know it, you know, it can be siloed. And I think that's also oftentimes a big criticism of government, municipal, you know, county, state, federal, and I'm right there complaining about it at levels aside from mine. And, but we do communicate truly. And we communicate as a group here, but that's why there are trustees on every committee as chair, but there are trustees on every committee as committee members. So we're aware. We do.
No,
but I think.
And
it's
you know, the
important.
thing is
I
that
think
you
that's
guys
important to
deserve
know.
a better place than what you got. And
Yeah.
the workers, you know, the village workers need a better place than what they are next to the library.
Yeah.
Totally agree. The village needs more infrastructure for that in administration.
Mhm.
I think what people that I've talked to reacted to was that article
Oh, clearly.
and the plan
Mhm.
that goes, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? I don't think anybody has ever said, you don't deserve it. The fire department doesn't deserve better.
I know.
The village administration doesn't deserve it.
Right.
The post office, God help us, deserves better.
We can blame that. on-
Julie,
But-
I envy you. No. But the thing is that, like Dick said, we don't want it cast in stone without further discussion. And if it is fait complete, we'll just have to
Mhm.
swallow our tongue and
Mhm.
go back and say, okay, when's the next tax increase going? So thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the time.
Yes, sir.
Terry Kelly, also in Woodcrest Village. You've mentioned a couple times tonight that you're gonna be voting on the CIP plan, project, whatever you wanna call it. So my question to the board, is it whatever the plan is that's being presented, that's it? Or can the board, as board members, amend and make, and come up with a different number and amend the plan at this point that you're voting on?
We can amend it tonight. I mean, like, it has not passed, so I think changes can be made tonight too.
Okay, because it kind of sounds, and I'm one of them, that I think in reading that article, 8,000 square feet, you know, huge atrium. Village of 1,000 people, no.
And no shit.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I do want to just correct something on that, though. We have to watch an amendment because it affects the budget, which has already been published in the paper. So, you know, when you're looking at the numbers, we have to try and stay close to those numbers that are in here. So we can certainly change things, edit them, but we do have to
You
be
can amend the
mindful of
budget,
the
too.
impact that has on the published
Can't you go back
budget.
and amend the budget?
Well, the budget has not been adopted, so yeah, we would end up having to amend the budget as well. So you can't just look at one document.
But so many times I've heard several folks saying it's not, nothing here is cast in stone. So if nothing is cast in stone, that gives you another chance to rethink this at this point and maybe pull it down a bit.
Well, what this meeting is saying in regard to the building, you know, the admin building out, because that was being discussed is, what this plan is saying is, we will commit, or we will plan on spending $3 million in 25 on a building. And then, of course, the plan has to be approved. Parks has a plan, or had approved a plan. It has to go out to the board to authorize it going to bid. Once you work with that bid, there will be more meetings to finalize a final plan. So this is really about, will we approve $3 million for a building?
In 25.
In 25.
Can I ask a question from Zoom?
I'm sorry.
Actually, Chris, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I guess following up on all of this. So what I'm hearing Julie say is if you approve the $3 million tonight, that building is going forward. At some level or some design at least up to $3 million.
What we're saying is that's our intention. Now, if you look at other things in the CIP, sometimes we approve them. And they don't, like Adam said, they don't happen. Or maybe they don't happen in that year. We had some stuff that, Wiltsey is a good example. It was in the CIP for last year. It didn't happen, so it got rolled into this year's CIP. So the plan is, that's what would happen. Doesn't mean it's etched in stone, because like I said, the plans change, plans are fluid, but that is our intention if we adopt the plan.
Which assumes that 3 million is a good number, so.
And that was based on an architect, engineering projections.
Did it include infrastructure, sewer and water to the property?
Not all of it, no.
A mere yes and no's.
Well,
According-
last
according
night,
to the
when we
engineer-
talked to him, he doesn't know what the, last night when we spoke to him, he doesn't have a number for the, parking lot yet.
But he did say yes, but he doesn't have final numbers until.
He said maybe.
If I can have a follow-up.
Sure.
So Julie, to your point, again, I want to go back to last year because there were significantly less people here. But your finance director at the same time, in the discussion, continually said that to change the budget tonight would be disastrous because it has to be published, et cetera, et cetera. And so the people there felt extremely offended that they're invited to a meeting that was basically decided. The point being made, I asked the question last year about the sewer and water department. Because I had heard, whether it was hearsay or not, that there was significant improvements to the sewer and water department that were not included, and I understand that most of those are user fees. But my question A is, are there needed improvements to the sewer and water that will be on the backs of the taxpayers? And B, I just wanted to make a comment, I would be vehemently opposed to a post office in the area of the old building, sewer and water, or public works building, because we need parking. Miles and I are good friends. I disagree with Miles. We need parking in downtown Sister. Thank you. So in response to the first question, is there any sewer and water improvements on the horizon that will impact the tax levy, the general levy of Sister Bay?
It's an enterprise fund, and so they work within their budget based on their projected revenues.
So that's a no.
However, the sewer and water bill might go up, which it did this quarter, didn't it?
Yes.
Being done now.
So with the improvements, the taxes might not go up, but our sewer and water bill will go
Their
up.
fees will go up, yeah.
Is that correct? So I don't think it's fair to say we're not paying more. We are paying more. We're paying it.
It's not on the tax.
It's not on the tax bill, but we will pay more.
We'll pay for it in our bills.
Exactly.
So to answer your question, Dick, that is not true. The rumor that there's significant changes needed at the wastewater treatment plant. We have been talking about a sludge dryer because we have to haul our sludge further now, so we're talking, which increases your rates. No fault of the village that have to haul them to Sturgeon Bay, and now Sturgeon Bay doesn't want them, so we have to haul the sludge further, right? So, we do have to look at a sludge dryer or buying more land to land spread sludge. That is the only cost that we've discussed. I mean, we know we need a lateral for this building or that building, but that's, you know, that's minor, I guess, or, you know, you try to capture that in that project cost. But I don't know what costs, what somebody would be referring to when they're saying we need major changes at the wastewater treatment plant, because we don't.
Well, that's why we were so concerned when we did that. I was on the study committee with others here. And looked at that property and said, we certainly don't want to use any land that would be then not available to an expansion of the plant, or, you know, obviously we wouldn't sludge spread out there, but other ponds or whatever was necessary. I understand you have capacity pools and those types of things out there, but it was just a question that I can bring back to people who say, but, okay. Thank you.
I think we had somebody on Zoom who wanted to make a comment.
Hi, yes, I'm Barbara Stout. I live on Northwoods Drive in Sister Bay. I have kind of, I guess, a philosophical question about the CIP and what the impact, if any, there is to putting this aggressive plan out there and then not being able to do all of this in 2025, because frankly, it's a lot to bite off in 1 year with the size staff we have in this village. So is there an impact from how the banks view us or what the village's credit rating is if we just keep pushing things forward instead of actually doing what the plan says we're going to do?
Oh, that's a really good question. So no, there is not an impact to that. Actually, what that does is there are plenty of municipalities where they have their CIP, and due to whether it's, you know, you have a potential bid for your project and now it comes in twice as the cost. Well, you're gonna have to make decisions then on whether or not you can do that. If you can't, then it moves basically to the next year of your CIP. If that continues to happen, that sometimes then is a strengthener for when staff is going after grants, because they then can showcase, hey, we have had this in the capital improvement plan for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you can see, unfortunately, due to either its increases in cost or the inability to fit it into the budget, we can't take on this project. So by showing that, that shows then to a lot of the granting agencies, as well as also, you know, when you're considering the federal and state government, when they do what are called appropriation requests. So you'll see that sometimes either in the state budget or even in the federal budget, sometimes you can get either your legislator to put a request into the budget to help fund a project. Well, what they want to see in a lot of those applications or writing is that you have had the inability to fund this. I ran into that in Platteville when I was the city manager. We had a fire station. Everybody's in the same boat. Our fire station was built in 1960. It is completely outdated. They have tried for 25 years to get that fire station done. Because we had it in our capital improvement plan showing that this needed to be a necessity, but we were never able to really get the funding due to the amount of debt that it would take to do it. We ended up getting a $7 million appropriation in the federal government that was put into the budget to go to the city. So that's where, you know, specifically, that's the point of having your capital improvement plan, is it's a plan to showcase we would like to do this. If you can't do everything that's in there in 2025, then it gets moved to 2026, or potentially then it becomes a conversation of, okay, you look at what wasn't funded in 2025 versus what you're supposed to be doing in 2026, and you have to have conversations. What are those items then that get shifted either from 2026 to another year, or do these items that were in 2025, they get pushed off? That's very common that in your capital improvement plan, you may not be able to do everything that's in here, but you want to at least showcase the needs of what you should be doing if you have the ability to do.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I did also want to comment on the scope and number of projects that are in the budget for 2025. I think it's a very, very aggressive plan. I don't disagree that we need all of these things. I do agree with the general feeling that the plans we've seen so far are kind of Cadillac plans, and we have, you know, the little old Toyota Corolla now. I think an 8,000 square foot building with an atrium is a pretty aggressive upgrade from where we are now, and it does seem a little bit extravagant for a village of our size with the staff that it has. I worry that whatever the village hall project is going to add some of the meeting space you need that will then be duplicated in the admin building. So perhaps we are doubling up on some of the spaces, but I don't know what that village hall plan looks like. And my final comment, really relative to what the community knows and understands about all of these plans. Yes, you had those listening sessions. I happened to be gone both weekends or both dates. So I wasn't able to go to those, but my husband did. And it's great to go look at a bunch of great pictures and beautiful layouts. But what we've always talked about after we've come from some of those events is, good Lord, how much is that going to cost? And what is that going to do to my taxes? So having a forum where you can see what is being recommended or what the pie in the sky might be is fantastic, but it's not the same as putting together the proposal of what the costs are going to be and how many years it's going to take to do that, and what the expectation is going to be for the taxpayers to, at some point or another, pay for that through the levy. So I think that's maybe where a little bit of the frustration is coming from. Great to have those events, but it's not the same as really collecting real feedback when the rubber hits the road and you're going to start breaking ground. Thank you.
So I just want to say the village hall, that project is based on a grant, so that's something, if we don't get that grant, that's not going to be part of it. It's included in the CIP, but it's not going to be an expenditure of the village unless we give a grant for it. So it's kind of hard to plan on that for space. Yeah, I think there was.
And that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, because 2 years ago, you weren't at that meeting. There are all of us. We have a petitions, I still have petitions with hundreds of signatures saying that they want that village hall preserved, they want it remodeled. Monies that were not spent for 15 to 20 years that were budgeted by the village, never spent to bring it up to date. We don't no longer have the flooding problem that we claimed we had before, because it never really existed. It was a broken sump pump. There's so much in this information about this, and this board needs to be responsive to what hundreds of people said they want to have happen. And I was shocked when I looked at the CIP and found zero money budgeted by this board. This is a village building that we're talking about. It's not some little private fribble that no one cares about. This is a place that we can have meetings. This is a place where it's going to be a multi-purpose building. We spent 2 years planning for that. And to find out that not one penny is budgeted, it's totally dependent on grants that we don't have. I'm appalled. If you want me to, I will go and I will get people to meetings again. I will get those people, those 200 or 300 people who signed petitions, back to talk to you about that, so you can hear how intense people are and serious about that.
Okay, hearing Nancy.
Can I have some explanation of why no money has been budgeted for that project?
I mean, I can't explain why nothing, that particular project, I mean, we thought the best option was to go for a grant on that. We still have hopes that that could happen. So it's not like we also did have a committee meet to work on that.
Yeah.
I mean, if that grant doesn't happen, it's not like it's dead.
We found the grant is not happening. We found that today.
Okay, so then we're going to have that committee come up with some other options for us. I mean, I don't know.
So the village paying for it is not one of the options that you're going to consider. Is that correct?
I don't think we've had that conversation, Nancy.
I'm sorry?
I don't believe we've had that conversation as a board.
No.
Well, it seems when you gave your priorities to, I'm sorry, Adam, is it?
Yeah.
To Adam, that the village hall was obviously not prioritized because there was nothing budgeted for it. So it seems that would have to be a conversation that should have taken place.
Is that something we can talk about tonight, or it has to go to parks?
So just a little explanation on that is the previous board had said that previous board, or maybe the one before that, had said that they were not gonna put money in the budget for it other than a small amount. It was $100,000. And that they created the Village Hall Planning Task Force and said they had to figure out how to save the building basically, or renovate it, and how to pay for it. And so they did not put anything beyond the original 100,000 in the budget. We were hoping that we would get a grant on it. We found out today that we did not. We knew it was a long shot. We ranked very high, but we didn't get the grant. I was talking with Nancy before. I think, we're now eligible for CDBG. We can try for CDBG. Again, there's no guarantee on it. But yeah, there has to be conversation about, or the board has the option to have conversation about, do they put money in the budget or the CIP for the village hall, renovation of the village hall?
If we get to the next item, we can discuss. So this is the public input portion of it, then we'll have what the board will talk.
There's a read.
Yes.
I won't repeat what everyone said, but I do agree, we absolutely need a new administrative building, but I think we really need to scale that back. I think, we're talking wholeheartedly about affordable housing and how people can't afford to live here. And yet we're building 8,000 square foot, $3 million building plus infrastructure. It just doesn't, it's ironic, it doesn't fit for me. I think we can make it practical, usable, and very comfortable for our village staff and our village, and not spend that kind of money to that kind of space. With the village hall, I'm not in favor of spending $4 million, but now I've been informed that we won't be spending $4 million, but I do agree that that needs to be looked at as well. The post office, the 1.65 million, are we obligated to provide that post office, or does post office pay for any of that themselves? I'm a little confused about that.
They do pay us rent. So
we build the building and they pay us rent. They don't go out and buy a building ever.
that is my understanding. They do not do that in our area.
And then just, as a general concern, the 16 million that we're looking at divided by 1,200 residents is $13,300 per person that we're asking to borrow. You're asking us to go out and be responsible for that as village people, as village members. And that's a lot of money per person. I mean, it's just, I think about all the people who live in affordable housing apartments now, and people who live at Scandia Village, which is not called anymore. But, 13,000, over 13,000 a person we're gonna borrow for. That's scary to me. I think we really need to take a step back.
Just a correction on that too. It's not based on per person, it's taxable property, right? Which we have a lot of more than 1,300 taxable properties.
I think I was just trying to quantify it in terms of per person. I don't think it's. Yes.
Hi there, my husband sent a draft of this to the board earlier, so I'll just kind of summarize and hopefully it's not redundant. My name is Bridget White. I live in the village with my husband and 5 children. I spent the majority of last night and several hours this morning reading through most of the 172-page packet that was posted. At first read, I found several interesting things. It was interesting to me how many major projects are on the table for the next 4 years that I feel the general public is not completely aware of. The new public works building, new admin building, village hall, post office, housing development, infrastructure, ice rink, marina building, etc. When the Peninsula Pulse published an article recently on the approval of a large new administrative building or potential approval, that was the first anyone I knew had seen a mock-up of the plans, and it was also the first time many people that I knew were hearing about the building at all. I'm totally in favor of planning for the future and think it's very important. I think that updating village facilities like the admin building to best serve the needs of the public and village employees is a great thing. However, the sheer scope of the village's proposed expenditures over the next about 4 years is astounding to me. As the summary of funds shows, if that was in that packet, 16.9 million for government and admin buildings, 5.9 for streets, 3.5 of which go towards streets in a potential new housing development that no one has ever seen plans for yet. 3.7 million for parks, 2.3 for an ice rink and facilities, 1.6 for updated marina facilities, etc. These are not bad ideas. In fact, I think many of the smaller park and trail projects, and even some of the larger projects, are great ideas for the future. But I don't think spending over $34 million over the next 4 years is the best thing for the village. While I know many of you on the board know exactly what is going on, I don't think that John Q. Public is well informed. In that respect, I think it's extremely important that the village thinks through and is able to answer the following questions for the public. Some of these were answered this evening. Are all of these new projects completely necessary to keep the village running efficiently? If so, why does there seem to be such a sense of urgency in pushing all of these major projects through at the same time? Surely all of these buildings are not necessary in the next 2 to 3 years. I see that almost 20 million in financing comes from bond sales, and you have provided more information on that. Thank you. It appears that almost 7 million needed for proposed plans comes from grants. Have these all been awarded yet? We just heard that one was not. I assume the plans do not go through if the grants are not given. What are the plans for the properties left vacant after buildings are demolished and built elsewhere? I see there may be a parking lot where the current public works building is, which I think is great, but what will happen to the site that the current admin building sits on? If the post office is potentially relocated in the future, as mentioned on the plan, what would become of the downtown property that it currently sits on? This may be a really good thing to know before going through with a $4.2 million village hall renovation next year, although we just heard that might not happen, as the two properties are adjoining. That much uninterrupted space along the waterfront presents the village with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create something truly incredible right there. I would urge the village to pause and consider a more comprehensive plan for this downtown area instead of updating the village hall on its own. On that note, has anyone seen the 2024 architectural drawings for the village hall referenced in the plan? Is there a mock-up or potential plan available to residents for the Wilkie property? We know it was purchased with the intention of building affordable housing development, and that the village has been working extensively behind the scenes on this. And according to the grant application, which is the first time I've seen any solid information on it, it is sufficient in size to develop 140 lots. And to make the homes affordable, they shall be built in bulk. While this may sound promising, what impact does this have on the village in the future? With its 140 additional residences, how many total occupants could this development house? Is it 500 people? Will there be 1,000 more people? Are the village water, sewer, and emergency services departments prepared for this jump in village population over time, in addition to already large new apartment complexes on Highway 57? And are we ready to allocate 3.5 million in funding next year to build streets and infrastructure for a project that the public has not seen a full plan for? In conclusion, I would ask the board and trustees for 2 things. Number 1, to please pause and consider which of the items are actually needs versus wants for the village, and to then adjust the 5-year plan accordingly. Maybe some of these big ticket items are reduced in scale, or maybe they get pushed to the 10-year plan. And number 2, to provide the public with more accessible information about what is going on, monthly email updates to residents, and maybe a Future of Sister Bay tab on the website with plans, descriptions, and answers to frequently asked questions will go a long way in helping people understand what's happening. The Ridges recently did a great job providing information on their 20-year plan in the same fashion. Thank you.
I think almost every question that you asked, we have an answer for. I'm sorry, you don't know the answer.
I think a lot of people don't know the answer.
And so what I'm going to invite everybody to do is to go to the village's website and sign up for all of the packets of information. Every packet for every committee or the committees that you're interested in. If you want the parks, you will get the parks packet. Everything that we as members on the Parks Committee get, you can read, you can look at plans, whatever it is that we're talking about. So you can kind of pick and choose, or you can get the packet for everything that's going on in the village, and you can do that right on the website, right?
Yes.
I think that getting the packets is just an extraordinary amount of information. I think what she was talking about was a future tab, like maybe would have a summary of each of the meetings so that you don't have to go through 150 pages of packet. And, you know, like bullet points.
You can read, you can go on to the website and under agendas and minutes, you can just read the minutes from the last meeting.
Actually,
But those are
like,
usually 3 to 4
on
pages.
the website, you know how there's the drop down, there's agenda and meetings, and you can click on that and there's tons of information. I'm saying, I think there should be an additional tab called future projects, with so many major projects being proposed in the village. Have one space where you put the plans, you put a description of each project for each building. You put most frequently asked questions that might pertain to that, so you don't have a bunch of people in the village going, wait, what did they say? Where did that come from? And you can just say, it's all listed on the website under this tab. Feel free to check there, and if you need more information, we can direct you further. I just think that would be really helpful to have all of this summarized in one location instead of having to sift through. I mean, I sifted through hundreds and hundreds of pages of meeting and agenda minutes last night and this morning to compile just this information. And it's a lot.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. The packets are way too long for the average citizen to get through in a reasonable amount of time, and there's way too much detail. It would be so helpful to have some place to get the highlights where you don't have to get through 200 pages of information and put together highlights in your head as you go. It's a lot.
So I think the minutes are gonna be your best bet for that. And if you don't agree with reading those 3 or 4 page minutes, pages of minutes, then I think you're asking for staff who's already pressed for time to create a summary, which I don't think they have time to do. But I like the tab idea, and we can certainly have a conversation about that.
So it's something else I think it's worth having more of a conversation. I mean, ultimately, what I'm hearing you say is just, we should do a better job communicating with the public. And this meeting here tonight is, and it's good, it's the community, the public communicating with us. And sometimes we hear stuff that we may not like, but it's really important that we hear all of that. So I guess what I would look at there is we should try and set, we talked about it in the past, here and there, but having a newsletter that we send out. I think that actually making the tab would be more work than just getting a newsletter out there. And we need to figure out how we should, let's get that on the future agenda.
We also do have a news and notices tab where we put bigger projects, draft projects out there for people to look at.
But there's a lot, if I could say something, one thing I will say that Denise mentioned, in terms of packets, for parks and for the administration building, there was no rendering of the building in any of the packets because the presentation was done via Zoom. You would have had to be here and look, or you would have had to zoom in and see the presentation online. I just want to be clear that, it's full disclosure, full transparency. You would not have seen it. In order to see it and to see what you saw in the pulse, they had to pull it from the video.
Is it the video available?
Yeah.
Old videos?
Yeah, the video is available, and that's what you saw. So we were not given in advance a file that showed the layout of the building.
If you can go to this past Monday's meeting,
It
you'll
was
see
in
it.
the
It was in the packet.
Right, but prior to that, when we asked for it before that, it wasn't there. The one that the Pulse got that they saw was from the web. It wasn't in that packet.
My one comment is, you know, you can go into your computer, look at these things, but not everybody has computer.
I'm not suggesting that that's the optimum, but in terms of looking at renderings and things like that, yep.
Yes.
So it's tonight, the final plan that will be happening tonight is voting on the CIP amount for the next year? Is that
So
what this?
it's adopting it for 25 to 28. I mean, realistically, next year, we could change 26 1 year from now, but we try and set general directions, set course for 5 years. So that is what will potentially get adopted.
So those were the numbers that you went through at the beginning? Or did Adam present those numbers?
Yes.
Is there any way that we could consider reducing those numbers?
So right now, we're taking public input on this, so to speak, and then once we're done with this, then the board will discuss it. So at that point, it's not going to, we're not going to just vote up or down on what is presented. There'll be discussion.
We'll go through
Right,
item by
one more.
item, right?
We can,
Oh,
we can review it.
I thought we were going to go and look at the items.
Sure. I mean, we're reviewing it, so however we want to do that.
So a board member could make a motion tonight that they want to take something out of the plan and the number that you approve could be reduced. That's a possibility.
Yes.
And it's also a possibility you could add money into the village hall
Yes.
process.
Or reallocate.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be some challenges that'll complicate budgeting, and I'm gonna have questions for those two gentlemen up here. If we change anything, make sure we understand what those implications are, but
Yeah, so I can try to answer, I guess, a little bit of that, because it kind of goes into play with it. So anything right now that's proposed in the capital improvement plan, that would be bond proceeds. Okay, that is an estimated number right now. So for instance, the administrative building right now is estimated at $3 million. And what the CIP is saying is that you would be going out in 2025 and bonding for that. Once that, what the plan does is essentially by adopting the plan, this is what you're saying you're trying to do in the next 5 years. As we've talked about, you may do it, you may not. So what happens then in the budget is there's a corresponding number right now in the budget that says the CIP is $3 million to the admin building. In your budget right now, you have $3 million that's going to be borrowed as bond proceeds. Now, when you're borrowing in 2025, we're not expecting any principal and interest payments to occur. So that is not, that particular, the admin building is not going to impact 2025's rate, your taxes. What that would impact then would be 2026 and future. So that goes to the question of what happens if it's more. That then has to be the discussion when you go through the bidding, you go through everything. If you have $3 million is what's in your budget, and now it's 4 million, 5 million, or 6, that has to be a discussion for the village.
Or you could cut it in half and could be 2.
That's the other option you have, absolutely. So it's a budgetary number. So right now it's showing that's what you're doing in 2025. If the decision is made by the board or it's made through public input that needs to be increased or decreased, that's the decision then that has to be made so that when you go out and borrow whatever it is, or however you're funding that, that's the number you have to come to. But right now, that's what's in the budget. It's showing that you have a $3 million admin building, which right now is being borrowed by bond proceeds. So anything that's bond proceeds, if it would be changed, that's not going to impact the CIP as far as what happens to the budget. What would be anything that is currently in your CIP right now that is to be funded by the capital project levy. That's that $1,089,000. If that would change, where you would make changes there, that then would have an impact on your levy. Because either it's going to reduce it, or if you're moving something to be paid by a capital project levy, it would increase it.
And we should, I don't think anybody has stated this yet, what is being proposed keeps the mill rate exactly the same.
Correct.
As last year.
So that $1 million,
There is no
that
increase.
$1,089,000 is what is being utilized to essentially keep your mill rate flat. If you would add anything to that, there's going to be an increase. If you would reduce any from that, then obviously you'd have a reduction.
So basically, you're using the bond to fund operate the village budget. So it's not being, you're basically taking that $1 million so that we don't feel a tax increase. So if we don't use it, we will feel a tax increase. Is that what you said? I might not have understood.
No, so right now, the $1 million that was proposed keeps your tax rate at level where it was. Essentially the same. There was no increase. If you reduce something from that $1 million number, then unless you increase something in your budget, your mill rate will go down.
I see.
If you add something, if you add something to that number, then it's gonna go up.
Point of information. the amount that was in here for that grant that we applied for, 4 million something for the village hall.
Mhm.
That was inflated because we had to include things specifically for that grant that we would not have included, and we did not include in our original plan. So the $4 million was an inflated amount, not what the committee recommended. It was inflated due to the demands of that grant that we applied for and did not get. So just a point of information.
Okay. Anybody else on the public like to speak? Yes.
Michelle Novak, 10848 North Bay Shore Drive. I am very concerned that this would affect my taxes even more than they did this past year, which I took a big hit on. And it really worries me, the amount of money, like what I read in the paper and all these projects that do seem a little over the top. And I guess that's my main concern. I don't care to see my taxes take a hit like they did recently. Getting unaffordable and unsustainable.
What did happen to the administration of buildings and the whole VOTI plan? When did that go by the side?
I mean, there hasn't been anything that the admin building just cleared parks and it has not made it to the village board yet. So there's.
No, it was originally in the
Talking about how.
Wiltie property, it's not water.
We had conversations about that when we became aware that the property was for sale. And because of negotiating, we had those conversations in closed session. When Ayers did complete their facilities plan, it did mention in there about the administration being on the Wilsey property. There's a big rectangle on the map in there, but in the text, it also said, or other property that the village is currently looking at, or something like that. So Ayers was aware at the time, but we didn't know if that would come to fruition, if the board was willing to make that purchase, cash purchase at the time. We had cash funds to do it. We were not interested in borrowing for it. And we felt that it was a really good, it's adjacent to the village, and villages and towns are created very differently. They're also governed very differently. And what a village is allowed to do is annex into a town. Villages are much more dense, the more centers of commerce than towns are. And so villages periodically, just like, we have done a couple of times already now, we're expanding our borders because we need a place to grow, because we are dense. But it was in the plan, but it was in the text. And at that time, not knowing, we brought it to the public as soon as we knew that we could talk about it publicly. And some of you may not like that we have those conversations in closed session, but we have to for negotiating and legal purposes.
Question on the availability of minutes. I'm on the website right now looking for Parks Committee minutes, and the most recent ones that are out here are from July 8th. When will the August, September, and October minutes be available?
We just approved both August and September last night, and the reason that we approved August late was because it was revised. We made some revisions. So those should be, I'd have to ask Janelle, because Janelle's the one that takes the minutes and posts them. So I would say I don't know, I would have to defer to you when she can get them up.
August and September should be on.
There you are, Janelle, sorry. Okay.
So the minutes only go up there after they're approved by the committee. They don't.
So you would wait, so for instance, we just had a Parks meeting yesterday. So the minutes from that meeting will be approved at the next Parks meeting, which is typically a month later. we approve
So you
them.
see, you understand the rub with that though, when we're advised to go look at the minutes to know what's going on, but the last thing we can see is from July, then it's pretty hard to stay up to speed
Well, which is
when there's
why,
3 months worth of meetings for which minutes are not available.
and that's why, I mean, before I joined the board, I spent a lot of time on Zoom.
Well, and we can only put approved minutes on the website.
Right, yeah, that's why it doesn't go up right away, because they're not approved.
A lot of people look at the meeting packet that is posted because that shows what they're going to be talking about. And the staff report or anything they have to review at that meeting is in the meeting packet. And that's usually posted the Friday before the meeting.
Right. And the issue with the meeting packets is that they're often hundreds of pages. It's a little bit much to get through, but I understand.
My question is actually about the bonds. So between 2025 and 2029, it says bond proceeds for these projects are 19.5 million. I know you guys said that our property taxes won't increase, but at some point over the next 20 years, we'd start paying all of this $20 million back. And I'm just curious where all of that extra money is coming from. Like, where is the extra income in the village coming from? Like, do we have a surplus in our budget every year? Like, do we have a net gain every year that's gonna cover the cost of these bonds every year? Or are we gonna have to raise prices somewhere?
So, yeah, I mean, that comes to conversations, obviously, when the staff is working on the budget and the board. That all comes into effect basically when they come with the mill rate. So if you want to keep the mill rate flat, essentially there's no increase. There's a couple of things that have to occur. You need to have, obviously, either your equalized and assessed value has to go up enough so that it covers whatever your new expenditures are. So for instance, every year, consider health insurance for employees is going to go up. Possibly, construction costs are going to go up, things are going to be more expensive. So that all plays into it. The bond proceeds are the same thing, is we try to work with the staff in feathering, okay, here's the amount of debt we need to take out. When that happens, there's ways that we try to then work with them to determine, okay, what is the mill rate that you want to work with? So if there is going to be a mill rate increase, how much of that mill rate increase do you want contributed to debt, to new debt?
What do you mean by a mill rate?
So the mill rate is essentially what you pay in tax. So whatever your home is valued at, yeah, the tax rate. So that's the mill rate essentially for the village. When the village comes up with their rates, I believe what's the latest one that you guys are at? 4.23, so $4.23 per $100,000. Okay, so that is essentially what we work with the staff on, trying to decide, okay, what is the goal? Is the goal to continually keep that flat, or is it that there's going to be an increase? If it's related to the debt, we'll show that in the projections. When they go and they actually, say, okay, we're going to take out this debt, we then will run projections then of what that does to the tax rate.
So
and
it could
show
increase it.
it could. But then that's where then the staff has to make a decision, is if they do not want the debt to be the reason that increases, then they have to reduce something, or there has to be revenue growth in order to cover that deficit. So those are all the things we basically work with the staff on to determine. And okay, if you're gonna take this out, you're going to have, X amount of an increase every year. Or essentially, we have to figure that out. What is, what's an acceptable increase? If not, then here is the amount of debt or essentially expenditure you need to reduce to cover that new debt that's coming out.
And outside of property taxes and resort area taxes, is there a large source of income for the village that could be increased in the future to help offset these costs?
So the village does have, they have what's called a fund balance. So essentially what happens is when their budget is established, you have your revenues and expenditures. If they, basically it's just like any budget that you would give. If your revenues come in exactly at your expenditures, you have zero money left over. Generally, what happens is there are things that either, just as they talked about, you don't do a project, you don't do something, potentially there's staff transition, so you had a period of time where somebody wasn't working for the village. So there are budgetary savings that occur every year. That then accumulates what's called the fund balance. So there is a fund balance that the village has the ability to determine that they could use to offset increases. Now, they can't do that every year because eventually that fund balance will be depleted, just like any budget. But there are, and for bond ratings, there are a certain amount most of the time, and what that is, your fund balance is there is a requirement from the bond agencies that they want it to be a certain percentage of your expenditures. Essentially, that's the village's, backup rainy day fund, call it whatever you want. If all of a sudden some emergency happens, they have to get it. What bond agencies or most rating agencies want to see is that a municipality has somewhere between 25 and 40% of what their expenditures are in their budget. So take the total expenditures for the village in a year, basically come up with 25, 40% of that, and that's where you want to be in that range. So the village has the ability, if they would choose, where if they don't want the taxes to increase because of debt that they take on, they could decide in the budget to have fund balance used to basically offset that. But eventually, you're gonna hit a level where they can't do that anymore. So then that's all the conversations and decisions that they have to make. So then it shifts to, okay, either they have to reduce something, or just like you said, there has to be a revenue source that essentially covers it, or they have to cut something.
Right, and I guess a question for you, or Glad, what is the typical net revenue of the village per year that could potentially be used to offset the cost of bond? I'm just thinking, all of these new buildings don't really make money. Unless you start charging for more use, like if you're making new parking lots, that's awesome, let's have a fee to park there. And make that a money-making asset for the village, so we can make money to help pay these bonds off.
So in the 2023 audit that was just completed for the village, the fund balance right now is about $1.6 million. So that is essentially the money that they have set aside, where if something would happen, they could cover a project, or if they wanted, they could essentially put that into the budget to, they could approve a certain amount every year to cover that. Now, historically, what the village has seen by budgetarily is that fund balance has been increasing every year. Now it depends. Some years it's been 100,000. Sometimes it's been 200,000. It just depends on what transitions they've had in the budget. But historically, they have seen an increase in their fund balance.
So there was a net revenue in 2023 for the village of $1 million.
No, so that basically from the beginning, the village has existed till now. There have been times where their budget has essentially come in where they had more revenues than expenditures. So that's where they have 1.6 million that is in fund balance that is available.
Is that separate from a reserve fund, or is that the same?
That is the
That
reserve
is
fund,
reserve.
correct.
So you're saying that the village doesn't make enough money unless they either have an increase in revenue somehow, or they increase taxes to cover the costs of the loans that we're taking out with these bonds to pay off that principal and interest every year. That money has to come from somewhere, and the village doesn't make enough to cover it per year.
No, so what happens is essentially in the budget, there is debt service that you're paying every year.
Right.
So essentially, whatever they pay off is what they can take on. So every year when they're paying off debt, they can go out and they can borrow more. And as long as those principal and interest payments essentially are the same, it's flat. You would not see an increase to your taxes.
Right.
Whereas
You don't
if
want to
that
carry
goes
debt
up,
millions every year.
what's that?
You don't want to carry a debt of millions and millions every year just because you can.
So this is where you get into municipal governmental financing. Part of that is the only way so there's levy limits. So part of the levy limit requirements is that you actually do have to have, if you don't take out new debt, your levy goes down. And so in order to take on new projects, that's where your tax rate goes up. Because if you levy less every year because you're not taking on new debt, eventually you're not going to have any debt. So when you do have to do a project, it's going to cost that much more to taxpayers. And that's where you get an ebb and flow of taxes. If you don't essentially try to keep your mill rate flat when it comes to debt, you eventually will have no debt. And the next time you need to do something, you're going to see your taxes skyrocket.
But Adam, we're seeing debt service as a percentage of our annual expenditures increase. I said it's 40, so for the total village budget, 45% of it this year, before we start increasing it, is, of our budget is debt service. That, we can't use debt service to do maintenance projects. We can't use debt service to pay people or to give them increases. We can't use debt services to pay the bills.
Right.
So the larger debt service becomes of your total budget, that's a bit of a house of cards. So I get the point that you've got a little bit of an equation you're trying to manage
Sure.
with multiple variables. But we can't just keep letting that debt service rise as a total percentage of our budget. In 2024 budget, it was 45% of the budget,
Let's just pay off debt.
just paying off debt.
And I get that we totally need to borrow money and do some of these big projects and that up, I'm just saying. I'm not trying to stir it up, but that's a big amount of money. $20 million to borrow. That's a lot of money to pay off for a village that doesn't take in a lot of money. And already has existing loans.
What's our revenue, like 5 million a year? 5 something?
But net is only 100.
No, I know, I just wanted to look growth of what the taxes and shared revenue.
Follow up to that, when you talked about the sources of revenue, there is state equalized value, which has increased slightly during the last year. There's premier resort tax. But I would suspect that our largest outside beyond the mill rate is our 0.5% sales tax, which goes directly to our budget. Is that correct? Anyone tell me what that was for 2023?
I mean, isn't room tax a bigger part than tax? I mean, the 0.5% tax goes to county.
It's about 350,000.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a question?
what is room tax at? Is it,
How often is your property reassessed?
what is
Because they
it?
had a big reassessment.
So that's determined by the state. So what happens there is you are allowed to essentially be at a certain percentage of the market value. So if you look at your tax bill, there is a section on your tax bill that will tell you what your current assessed percentage is at. And when you're reassessed, what's supposed to happen is you're basically supposed to be back at 100%. You are allowed essentially to dip, I believe it is
80%?
85 is when then you start to get a notice from the Department of Revenue that says you have 5 years essentially to get this up. If you don't, then essentially the state comes in and they will reassess for you. But normally what your assessor will try to do, depending on the contract that you have, is it's either they do it every other year, they'll assess certain portions of the municipality, or essentially every 3 years usually is when they try to do a full-on reassessment. And that just depends on the contract. But they try to keep in line with, now part of the issue has been too, if you've noticed, your assessed value versus what your equalized value is very different. So if you went to sold your home today, it's just been reassessed. So hopefully now it's probably closer to where if you put your home on the market today, you're getting close to what it's assessed. But that's what happens with equalized and assessed values is essentially, once that gets on whack, you're forced essentially by the state to get that back up.
Well, it was huge this last time. Very huge. So this is what people are afraid of. Is the taxation through assessment. That is a technique.
So room tax in 2023 for the village was about $533,000, and it was up about, I think about 5-6%. And Pratt in 2023 was $342,000. And on a year-to-date basis, Pratt is down 8%. We don't have the last part of it yet, but Pratt's down 8% at about 185. I mean, most businesses are flat. And that's Pratt. That's where Pratt comes from. Pratt sales tax. So between the two of them, it's about roughly 900,000.
Which is monies that we didn't have prior to Pratt room tax, which is less than a decade. So the village operated without those amount of monies, not so many years ago.
I hear you.
Go down here.
Okay.
So, hello everyone, my name is Janelle Solians, and I'm the administrative assistant for the village. Before I start, I'd like to thank those of you who mentioned that you realize that the administration building is in rough shape. I've been working for the village for 19 and a half years now, and since day one, I've heard promises from village officials that the existing administration building would be replaced with a modern, energy-efficient building that's equipped with a spacious meeting room and at least 2 conference rooms as soon as possible. Unfortunately, that promise has never been fulfilled, as other projects always seem to take priority, and therefore the new administration building project has been on the back burner for a very long time. I and the other employees in the village office were thrilled to hear that the new building was included in the CIP and would finally be coming to fruition, as the existing building definitely has a number of issues that are quite problematic. For example, in spite of the fact that several attempts have been made to repair it, the roof of the administration building continues to leak. Water seeps into the IT copy room, which is quite humid and is very small. And if we get heavy rains or a lot of powdery snow with high winds, the window in the finance director's office leaks like a sieve. Speaking of windows, several of the windows of the administration building don't lock at all, which is really quite troubling from a security standpoint. In fact, on one occasion, when the former utility clerk forgot her keys, she was able to gain access by the building by merely opening and crawling through one of those windows. After that occurred, the maintenance department employees did repair the locks on the windows, but because the humidity levels fluctuated and the wood on the windows eventually swelled, those repairs only proved to be a temporary measure. There is no such thing as having a private conversation in the current administration building, even if you're behind closed doors, as the walls are paper thin and the doors are not solid. To be perfectly honest, I've heard a number of conversations that I probably shouldn't have. Unless people who wish to have private conversations whisper, all or parts of their conversations can very easily be discerned by anyone else who's in the building. In addition to that, there definitely is a lack of available on-site parking space, as parking spaces are very limited, and 5 of the spaces that are available are utilized by staff members on a daily basis. The most troubling issues that I've noticed with the existing building would actually pose health concerns. Every spring, when it first starts to thaw, or if we get a lot of rain, there's a definite odor of sewer gas in the portion of the building where my office is located, and on a couple occasions, the sewer lines have actually backed up. That definitely was no fun. In addition to that, there are large black ants and spiders everywhere. A pest control company has been hired, and that definitely helps, but it still is not unusual for an ant or a spider to periodically crawl across my desk or fall from the ceiling, and the glue traps that have been placed around the building are frequently full of dead little critters. In conclusion, I would like to say that none of the employees in the administration office want an elaborate, oversized, or cushy new building. We have given a lot of thought to what is actually needed, and all our needs were incorporated into the draft plans that were prepared. I have worked in other municipalities where there were on-site meeting rooms, and I can't stress enough how much more convenient such a feature is. Thank you for your consideration.
I'm the utility clerk for Sister Bay, and I just want to go and discuss a little bit about some of the issues that we also have. The heat in the building is absolutely horrible. I have to wear long underwear, pants, tops, wear a blanket, and when the windows don't hardly insulate anymore, you can feel the outside of the blanket is like ice cold. So the heat is horrible in the building. The transom windows, we have to have duct tape closed because they pop open. They rattle all the time. When the wind blows really hard, the air quality is horrible in the office. Also, everybody is coughing, sneezing. My husband is worked in the building and he's concerned about asbestos being in the building up in the attic. So there's issues with the building that we don't need anything fancy. We just want something that's safe.
Statement.
Yes.
So I took 2 minutes to write this down. Forgive me for reading it. I'm Heidi Tite, clerk for the Village of Sister Bay. I agree with Janelle's comments and Kara's comments on the condition of our administration building, and would like to add that the building poses challenges in other ways, such as having no space for our auditors when they come to work, or outlets for them to plug into because fuses are blown when we try to plug in anything extra in that building. We have had a door that hasn't been fixed for 3 years. It blows open in the wind, and we've been told it's very expensive to replace that door, so please just wait until the new building. You might come on a windy day and find it locked because we can't leave it unlocked. It'll just keep blowing open. It's difficult for anyone in a wheelchair or a walker to enter that building. The space is very tight for them to navigate. And we will soon encounter a serious space issue when all of our archived materials, which are currently in the Parks building here, need to be brought back to the administration office for storage. I would like to touch briefly on challenges that occur when elections take place. In-person absentee voting is at the administration office. The only place that voters can go for any kind of privacy is a single desk that's hidden behind a bookcase. There's no privacy unless I beg somebody to take a day off so that we can utilize their office for extra voting space. I have to, when voting day does come, I have to pack up everything related to elections that's being stored there because this building is not 100% secure, and bring it to the fire station on election day. This building is not handicap accessible. The front doors are heavy and blow shut. My little door stops don't keep them open. Anyone with ambulatory issues does have problems getting into this building. Ideally, there should be 2 doors to this voting space so that people aren't tripping over each other as they're coming and going on voting day. The only reason we have not been called out by the state for accessibility at this location is because this building is more than 20 years old. It can be busy on election day, and I expect that we will have over 900 registered voters by this upcoming election. Who knows what that number is going to be in 5 or 10 years? I don't know. Administratively, I can't finish the paperwork at the end of the day after an election because my office is at the administration building. I have to pack everything up, take it back to the office, and where I'll spend another hour working after the poll workers have all gone home to make copies and complete the work on the computer that I can't do here at the fire station. With Sister Bay growing by leaps and bounds and new voter registrations coming in every day, I would love to have everything all under one roof. Finally, I have a copy here of some statistics that were included in the annual report prepared for the board in 8th January. This shows annual meeting attendance at board meetings here at the fire station. And I'd just like you to compare this to the setup of the room tonight. We have chairs out here for 35 people. So you'll see attendance has been on the rise. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
As a resident, did not realize the appalling conditions that our administrators were living in. And I mean, this doesn't sound like we can wait for a building to be built. This seems like we needed to find something to rent or in some other building for them to be able to work in proper conditions. And I'm just stating that as a concern for them and just my opinion.
All right.
May I speak?
Yeah, we're just gonna take a 5-minute recess at some point here. If you
Okay.
want to speak first, that's.
In August of 2021, the village board discussed a capital improvement plan for the next 5 years, 2022 through 2026. The plan was sent to all committees for input, and the village board approved the final plan in September of 2021. The largest CIP item in that plan was the administration building that everybody seems to be talking about tonight. And that was proposed at $5 million and to be implemented in 2023. In the spring of 2023, the village hired Ayers and Associates to do the facilities plan, which I think has been referenced multiple times, incorporating a parks maintenance building, administration building, post office, ice rink, dog park, community gardens, compost site, long-term boat storage, tennis and pickleball courts, Sister Bay Advancement Association information booth, and a future site for the fire station. During July, August, and September, there were multiple public meetings that were held along with 2 open houses to discuss the location and character of the parks maintenance building and the administration building. Those meetings were attended by village officials, stakeholders, and the public. And in October of 2023, that facilities plan was approved by the village board. After the facilities plan was completed, the board decided to push off the administration building until 2024. And as I stated earlier to somebody's question, that's when we became aware of the Lagerquist property, and that might give us some more elbow room and be a better fit than cramming it onto Wilsey right next to the sewer and water plant. Then 2024 came around and we again pushed the building off until 2025, and we reduced the amount to $3 million. For over 15 years, the village board has been working towards building a new public works building along with the new administration building. When the village purchased the Helms waterfront property in 2007 and the Al Johnson's boutique on the water property in 2010, every other project was put on hold and pushed out because the board chose to invest in a public waterfront that took every dollar, all of our CIP savings from these projects and more. The village administration building was built in the late 1940s and housed the Bank of Sturgeon Bay. When they vacated the building around 1972, the village moved in. The village staff was a fraction of what it is today, and the village population was just 483 people, much less than half of what it is today at almost 1,200. In the 2003 comprehensive plan, 21 years ago, and we're currently working on that now and updating it, it states in that plan pertaining to the administration building that it is already too small 21 years ago, and we're still in. The previous village board felt the administration building was a top priority. Don Cox, who is no longer with us on this board, was quoted in June of 2023 as saying he believes the administration building needs to be dealt with first. Nate Bell, who is our current president, was also quoted in June of 2023 as saying the administration building is a top priority. I also feel it's a top priority. What will the trickle down effect be of not moving forward? Will we delay all of the projects that have been slated in the CIP that come after? When will the Mill Road Triangle infrastructure get done? Costs will continue to rise, and the interest rates in 2026 and beyond are unknown. If we move forward now, the general obligation debt that we take out next year will not affect the 2025 budget, as you heard that has been stated. Our first payment will occur in 2026. Taxes will not go up because of this project. Just for comparison, I'd like to walk you through how the village functions currently and what's being proposed. So this meeting room that we're sitting in right now is 1,417 square feet. The proposed meeting room is 1,395, a hair bit smaller. The current storage room is 168 square feet, which I believe is behind the double doors here. And what we are proposing is 314, so quite a bit bigger. The executive conference room down the hall, which we call the small room, then we use it for closed sessions or very small meetings, is 234 square feet. The new proposed conference room is 36 square feet larger at 270 square feet. We have tried very hard to not build the Taj Mahal, and it may look that way on paper. And as Janelle spoke earlier, we tried to build it appropriately, smartly, and to have a little bit of space for future growth because we don't know what the future will bring. I understand that the atrium is larger than some might want, and I don't disagree with that. We at Parks originally wanted a meeting room to hold 175 people. And in the end, we shrunk that down to 75. allowing overflow, if needed, to be held in the atrium. The Parks Committee also decided to have the architecture of the administration building try to look like a farmhouse to fit in with the historical Waterquist Corner. We asked our designer to try and shrink the atrium size, but it looked ridiculous. And we were also told that by making it a smaller span than 25 feet, that the builders would have to special order steel cut beams, and it would actually cost more. Thank you.
I still think that we need a kitchen. There needs to be a kitchen in that place. Right?
Well, we discussed it. I have to say, we discussed it, Park, and I did ask the question, what would our residents use this building for? There's nothing that you would be able to do, except a meeting, if you needed, so, you know, it's full disclosure. I did not vote to move this building forward. I think it should be smaller. I think that the administration office needs new offices. The team needs a new office. Janelle, I know you do. We're going to that office for 8 years. I'm fully aware. I'm not trying to take an office away from you, truly. And, you know, I wanted, originally, the seating was 188, not 175. I asked to take it to 50, and that failed. And then we compromised at 75. And we don't ever have a meeting, and you can look at what Hyatt just passed out. So people just don't attend, sadly, which is what we just discussed. We don't have a lot of people that attend, but even if it was, you know, even if we did have that, inside of it, the dais, so this is the oval space where we all sit, is immovable. So, and that is okay, I think, because there's a lot of electronics in it, you know, but maybe there's a smarter way to do it. I look at Sebastopol, which is 2,700 people, and they have a meeting room, and you can rent it out. It has a kitchen and it holds 100 people. And I'm assuming that they get all their, whatever they need for their meetings in there. Honestly, I've been to meetings at Sebastopol. I've not been to a town meeting there. I've just been to either DDC or DCTZ meetings there. So, and it's nothing fancy, but it's there. And I don't think they have, I'm not sure how many staff members they have. Probably not 5 or 6, but they apparently have enough space for the offices. But I think there's a way that we could make it smaller. And I did ask that we try to make it smaller. I asked that we tried to move it out of the CIP from 25 to 26. And I think that's something that we should discuss based on feedback that we got after the Pulse piece was published, and comments on Facebook. Some were really valid, and some understandably were folks that didn't maybe really understand what, you know, how we got where we are, but also from the feedback here. So that would be, and this is not news to anybody that's on Parks. So Lily is also on Parks. She's unable to come. She has a pretty bad dental issue at the moment, but that's my take on it.
Okay. I'd like to continue with board discussion, but I need to take a 5-minute recess here.
Okay.
So I'm gonna do that and then.
So just so the public doesn't have to wait around then, so are we gonna allow more public input?
Yeah, there'll be more dialogue. It's this, or, I mean, it's largely gonna be more.
Okay, so after the break, it's gonna be the board talk.
So no more public dialogue. So
No,
they know
I think
that.
some public dialogue, but I'd like to focus it on the board. We've been trying to focus on the public, and the board is focused on. I'd like to flip that up. Okay. We'll come back in the session then. All right, everyone. Okay. So. Please.
Yeah, sorry.
So starting the conversation up here at the board level. I mean, one of the questions that I'd asked you, Vlad, and you and Adam, was what happens if something gets pushed? And I think we've largely have the answer to this already. What happens if something gets pushed from the 2025 CIP past that? And either from what you've explained tonight and what you've explained to me previously, is this would not impact the 2026. It has the potential of having a number of projects start compounding if you don't push other projects out. But I guess, I'd like, in your words, what happens if we push something in the CIP past?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially right now, you've got your CIP plan that has the 5 years. So if you decide that something in 2025 gets pushed to 2026, well, then obviously, you know, there are implications then of what are you doing with that? Are you going to borrow it again? Are you going to potentially use, is it going to be a combination of using your, you know, CIP levy, general fund levy, et cetera? So that's the first kind of conversation is you have right now, whatever project that is. So if it's $3 million, which has kind of been discussed, and that's being decided, you know, currently in the plan that's showing bond proceeds. Okay, you move that to 2026. Well, the first thing that you would look at is, does that now become bond proceed in 2026? What happens then in 2027 then would more than likely be the first time that would be principal and interest payments. So we have to look at all the other projects that you have in your CIP that are essentially going to happen in 2020, same thing. And 26 now becomes starts to be funded in 27. So any projects that you have in 2026 that now we're going to be funded in 2027, you have to go back and look at what is that going to do to mill rate? You know, because you originally weren't planning on that. So that plays around with that. You know, now go to the project itself. With the project, you're talking construction costs. You don't know. They could go, I mean, they're not going down, as we all know. Construction costs, nobody's coming to you saying, sure, I'm gonna do it cheaper, or my costs are less. So typically, for the most part, when you delay a project, you're going to see some form of an increase. No one has a crystal ball, you know, maybe you'll be able to keep it where it is.
Depends on the design of the building.
But they're right, so you know, that's the thing, you don't know. You don't know if that's going to be an increased cost. You know, interest rates are the other one. So right now in 2025, they're expected that they're going to at least stay level, or there potentially may be a reduction. You've got an election year coming up, you have, you know, disasters that are occurring right now.
Yeah.
That all is gonna play into 2026. So in 2026, you may see an increase based on elections, you may see an increase based on that, or they could stay flat. I can't say they're not, but you know, usually if you continue to put something off, you're going to see an increase in that. So those are kind of the, you know, the three players that you're looking at. And then as far as other projects, it's okay, if now you've moved that to 2026, it's, are you able to add that in? Or potentially now are you talking about something else in your CIP potentially having to be pushed out further? That's the questions for the board of the community to figure out.
So if you wanted to not have it really compound some year over year, you'd have to push something in 2026 out, push something in 27 out, so you'd push everything out 1 year.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd have a lot of.
I mean, yeah, essentially you're looking at, if you move something to 2020, if it's $3 million or whatever the number is and it moves to the next year, then realistically, you're probably taking something of that same value and pushing it out so that it lessens the impact to the municipality.
Okay.
But if you're taking something out of 25, does it reduce 25?
So right now, if it's bonded, it's not gonna have an impact because essentially
We haven't bonded.
you
for
haven't,
this yet, I
right,
don't
you haven't
think.
bonded for it. So what it compounds then is what happens in the future years is,
Yeah.
that's the issue.
So I had a question on page, well, it's page 15 of our packet on the summary of funds. The numbers don't match up.
So that is because you are anticipating to use reserves for certain things. So there are reserve funds that you have,
So like the ending fund balance doesn't match with the beginning fund balance?
and that's done on purpose. So you've got $16.7 million worth of revenue. If you, well, I'm looking at, hold on. let me go.
I'm looking at page 15.
Yeah, so you've got there's essentially $34 million of proposed expenditures through the 5 years. If you see that at the end. What you're showing is there is about 33 million in proposed revenue. So that difference is what is being covered by funds that you have in reserves. So there are reserve accounts that you have for certain projects. So like in your general fund, there were some land sales that didn't occur that you essentially have some surplus in some of the collections, the water and some of those areas, you have some reserve funds. So what you're indicating is everything came to fruition in your CIP. you would be dipping into some of those reserve funds in order to cover those.
Well, it seems the opposite. It
Those
seems the
gaps.
ending fund balance in 2026 is larger than the beginning fund balance in 2027.
So there are some projects where potentially if they go over 2 years, that potentially you may be doing the borrowing or financing in 2026, but they may not be occurring until 2027, or it might be a mix. So some of that you will have where you'll see there'll be an overage that essentially carries over into the next few years. That can happen, where you have some projects, if they go over 2 years, that you may be borrowing or the funding may be coming in 2026, but you may not fully be expensing it till 2027. So there's a little bit of you then have a savings that's occurring or a balance that then is being used up.
As long as it was intentional.
Yes.
That's good.
So in general government, we got 4.2 million for the village hall, and did we offset that with the grant in the plan?
Yes. So
All
that
right,
was
so
100% grant.
It's a net zero.
So it's a net zero.
All right, so if we decided to give it some money and put something in there, then we're up, whatever that might be.
Correct.
That's an increase. Okay. So we have that. We got the public works building, which the signs out front, they're gonna start digging. It's a done deal. And same with broadband, right?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So in 25, it's the admin building, and then also, I think, infrastructure for Wiltsey. So my question on Wiltsey is, I know we haven't gotten to the grant yet, but if we don't get that grant, because it's 3.5 million that we're going for in the grant for Wiltsey, right? And are we assuming in the CIP that we're getting that grant, so it's offset or what?
No,
Mm-mm.
no, the grant is for a little over 6 million. It's a long shot. We have no idea.
Okay.
What's in the SIP is the 3.5, which we had in there last year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we just took what was in there last year and pushed it forward to this.
Okay, I know we aren't discussing that yet, but I wondered if there was, so we have no revenue to, okay, not the 6 or any other number in there. Okay.
Well, we can talk about that 3.5 million in the SIP, just not the grant.
I got you. Yeah. I understand. I understand.
When are we talking about this in order? Or are we talking?
We
about-
are not, the grant we're talking about is
Well, I
the
mean,
last
how does
agenda
Nate want to
item.
go through this? Are
No, we can keep going.
We can keep
Should we
going.
talk about
I beg your
Witsy
pardon.
or should we talk?
No, we're sticking with SIP. It's okay.
Okay.
So then if you
I mean,
want,
but Wiltsey's in the SIP. I kind of wanted to talk about the Wiltsey part of the SIP.
Okay.
Is this a-
yeah, this would be a good.
So I am still not in, I have major problems with Wiltsey and I kind of have this whole year and a half I've been on the board. I don't feel like we have a plan. I don't think we have a plan. I don't like the plan of adding 1,000 people to our village, essentially doubling it with 140 plus the apartments plus everything else. That is so many people, so much traffic. We don't have the infrastructure in our downtown. We don't have the coffee shops for these people. We don't have beach space for these people. We don't have, and we're supposed to be building this for Sister Bay residents, but who are these Sister Bay residents and workers? I don't understand who's going to move in there. I don't think we have a plan at all, so I am not ready to spend money on infrastructure when we don't have a plan. And
We
I
would not spend money on infrastructure until the housing committee comes up with a proposal on what kind of mix would be
It just
there.
sounds scary to me to have all this money that we're putting at it, and then I feel like if we have it there, or if we get this grant, which we're not talking about, that we're going to have to start building roads and doing all this when we don't know what we're doing. And that's really scary to me. I just was in Ephraim walking today and somebody was building maybe a half a mile or so away. I don't even know where they were building, but it was so loud. And that made me think, if we're gonna be building there for like 15 or 20 years, how loud that's going to be. It's just, I have so many issues with this Wiltsey project that I am not ready. Last year, I didn't like the 3.5 million when we were trying to get rid of money. That was where I was going. I still have a lot of issues with putting money towards infrastructure this year. And I think we need this housing plan before we do more. That's
I
my
would agree
Wiltsey
with you.
thought.
Denise, I think where it's confusing for you and for me is that it is in the SIP, for 2025. It doesn't mean it can't move out. This is where SIP is a bit of a, but, the grant that's being applied for is for more than that. And I would agree, and Patrice is chair of housing, and I know they've started that process and stuff. And so I would agree that, you can't really do infrastructure if you're not quite sure what you're building, right? So, yeah, I don't know, but I know this was moved from 24, right? I think, 23 or 24, because I think we bought it in 21, didn't we? I don't remember.
Yeah, closed on it in, 21,
Okay, all right,
like February or something.
yeah. So it needs to be fully fleshed out before we can decide. I don't know if what the harm is in moving it out, but
I don't think that there's harm, leaving it in either, if
we don't spend it.
right, we're not gonna borrow that money if we don't get the grant to put in infrastructure, if we don't have a concrete plan that, plan commission, parks, and this boards all sign off on what the mix is, single-family homes, townhomes, apartments, the percentages, how many, et cetera.
And what the infrastructure is gonna look like, because there's streets and stuff.
Right.
Because I think our big question last night when we were talking about it is there a deadline to start it if we get it? Because it's if we get a couple million or whatever we get, I know it's a long shot, but I don't know that if we figured that out yet. When you have to start the grant in order to get it. Sorry, when you have to start the project in order to get the grant, beg your pardon. I thought it was 30-30, but it may be 20-30, but it may be sooner.
So if we pull this out of 2025, that means we can't do this in 2025. If we leave it in there in 2025, we still have to approve it at multiple levels before it happens. So.
And we haven't borrowed on it, right, or bonded or anything else for it. I'm not sure how we're paying for it, but
It'd be bonding, right? So you would have to, again, just as the President alluded to, you'd have to go through you have to have the plan basically fleshed out and approved before you're going to borrow for it. So this is saying, essentially what your CIP is saying in 2025, you're going to try to have that all finalized. If it doesn't, and it doesn't happen, then you're not borrowing for it. And when you update the CIP, then it would be just as it happened in 2024, in there, it would shift again. But at least then this is showing that you're at least trying to, get some resolution on that project.
Is there any negative impact to it if we leave it in there and we don't spend it? Nope. It's not gonna have any impact on credit rating or anything like that?
No. Because again, until the board officially makes the approval to bond that, that's when it starts the clock of then you're having the rating agencies look at that to see the impact. That then determines all of the rates that we look at. Right now, it's basically you're saying you're budgeting, you're gonna try to do that. But until you officially approve it, it's hypothetical.
I guess in my head, just thinking personally, like as soon as we actually start looking at it, then that's a hard credit inquiry. Until then, it's just a soft.
I was just afraid of having it there, it's going to push us forward. But if it's not pushing us forward, then I'm okay with it.
I have a lot of your concerns, Allison. I think that, we need to have a very solid plan before we start spending funds. And I believe that it may not be exactly the plan I like, but I believe this board will come up with a solid plan before it starts expending funds. It may not be anybody's ideal plan, but it's usually what happens on the board is there's compromise, and I do believe that we'll come up with something that is thought of before we start spending money, especially that much money.
Okay.
If we have to spend that money too, because there could be other funding sources that come up, and that could be a good point there.
I would like to establish when the deadline is to start the project. That's all with that.
We'll hit that next item. I also would say that, Denise, I don't think I've ever seen this many people show up at a CIP meeting, anything related to it in the
I've
10
been here
years.
30 years.
Yeah.
No. This was it.
And that's a good thing. Public engagement is a good thing.
My question about the post office too is, I know we have it in 26, and when you talk to them, they're finally they actually talk to you. And when is their lease up?
Coming here, they only.
25?
I have to pull the file, but yeah, it is because, they only talk to you in the last year of the lease. And they agreed to I shouldn't say they agreed, we're waiting for an answer to extend it. Not a full term of the lease, but, on a year-to-year basis to give us time to figure out what a building would look like if they would agree to it, et cetera.
Oh, so the lease is over the end of this year,
No, this coming year.
the end of 25? Okay.
How long are leases?
I believe there's three, I think there's three.
So if we build a building, they really only have to stay there for 3 years? If they agree to one lease?
Technically, yeah, they could leave after 3 years. I would hope we try to put something longer in that, you know, with the new contract.
And they're okay with Mill Road, because there was a time they didn't want to leave 42, now they're called Mill Road. Good news. Okay. I just think $1,650,000 for that building is a lot. But I know.
I actually think it's a little low,
You
but.
do?
Yeah.
Well, I know it has to be large because of Amazon and the packages, and I don't work there, and we need to let's ask somebody that works at the post office. I have no clue.
I guess
I know we need a drive up, that's what I know.
I wonder how many other municipalities are actually providing post offices. I mean, like, this is a federal problem. I understand the US Postal Service is important for the village.
You mean providing a building to lease?
Yeah.
Most communities do not do that.
Yeah, that's what I was,
From our research, in the past, that we have found,
Okay,
and,
so if we
what
don't, then they
usually-
aren't here or something?
what usually happens is, somebody will build a building, privately.
Huh?
But there's not a lot of money also in the rent
Yeah.
that they give us. So we will never incur enough rent to pay for the investment of the building.
Well, is there an existing building?
So it
then?
becomes do we want a post office in our community that's manned? Or because there was talk not that long ago that we could have PO boxes there, but it would not be manned. So if you wanted to mail a package or have any kind of window service, you would have to go to Fish Creek, Bailey's Harbor, possibly Ellison Bay. I mean, we always thought that Sister Bay was more of the hub. But when we had talked, I think the last time the lease was up, the feds had said, well, if you don't want to kind of renew the lease, then this is what we'll do, and we'll just leave Sister Bay.
And that's not a great option.
oh, but at the same point, the postal service would leave Sister Bay no matter what we do. Because, I mean, I've talked to a number of postal employees that they are so subservient to Amazon right now because they are the biggest single customer, and they have a huge influence over what the US Postal Service does.
Yep.
And I'd hate to see us invest in something, and I don't know what that future is. They could be fine for the next 20 years. But we may only get a post office for 3 years from
What
now.
can we do, a public-private thing or something, or part of it's a public building and part of it's because a brand new building.
Well, we did talk once, depending upon the space that the post office would need. On adding. I don't think we determined what kind of square footage, but making it adjacent to the post office, something that could be rented out, whether it was retail or another service or something of that nature.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about what's now the Parks building, and it goes there, you're taking away the ability, if we wanted to put a parking lot there or something there.
And I would say that putting a post office there is gonna have a lot more impact on that than having a parking lot there. Because you have a parking lot there, it can be not a parking lot pretty quickly if things change. When you put a building there, you're gonna
Yeah.
tear it down to.
100%, yeah.
And that doesn't mean, I think, when Ayers did the plans, and there were a couple of different plans. Post office with an admin building, et cetera, there would be space for parking beyond just the post office.
Mhm.
So, certainly not as much. But Nate constantly reminds us that we don't have a parking problem, we have a transportation problem.
Well, I would agree, but I think it's like I don't know, you got a parking problem. 4 months a year. But anyway, back to this, you're right, 1,600,000 doesn't get you much, but I'm just wondering if there's an existing building that we can do something with and put them in there and not, you know, but you need a lot of parking, you need truck, they have to have space for trucks in the back, you know?
The facilities plan did look at that. They did look at all the buildings that were out there. Was there any other?
Building that the village doesn't own,
Why can't we stay where we are?
it's pretty small, I mean, Amazon,
It's too.
oh my God, yeah, I don't know, I haven't talked to the new postmaster, but when Emil was there, yeah, when they would get deliveries, they get 2 huge box trucks, and this is, you know, Christmas, but even other times now,
That building has, yeah, it's not big enough.
there's not a lot of storage
They have-
behind the PO boxes.
They have issues with parking. Their trucks have been hit twice, I think just last year. They have issues with people at the park dumping. I know they had talked one time about people walk by and they drop their beverages down the mail slots where people have their mail.
Oh, that's super fun.
There's a lot, the building itself is not to code. If you go in there, there's one restroom that everybody shares. It's kind of in the office area. It's kind of about the same situation as the admin building where you just have this old stuff that was just bandaged together. It's pretty rough once you're on the inside in there. Space is their biggest issue though.
Yeah, they need it, I mean, and that's gonna be, I guess, the salvation of the United States Post Office, I don't know. And why our mail takes 2 weeks longer than it used to. All right, so, I mean, it's silly, we keep it in 26, but
I'm not sold on it, but I also don't think pulling it.
yeah,
out
I
of
just wish
26
there was a
makes
building
sense.
we didn't know that we could put them in, but they won't like, I don't know if they like the location, like, you know, Mike Flood's old office. That's sitting there half empty, I think.
Too far from
Too
downtown.
far.
I know, well, okay, people would still go there.
They went though.
They're awful demanding for wanting, us to take care of it.
Or even up near Ava Hope or something out, you know, someplace
Yeah,
out
they-
there,
why
or
they
or near the pig, everybody goes to the pig. Go to the pig, go to the post office. So do we have it, if there's units there, I know there aren't, but you know,
As much as that's frustrating to me, I also, as much as I think Julie's very capable, I don't think she's gonna convince the
You know, the-
government to think differently.
But so they insist on being downtown? I mean, have we told them our problems? I mean, up by the old Aurora would be.
They do insist on being downtown. They insist within being a block of the downtown area. And they do that because they don't want to have to start doing mail delivery down here and having their trucks stop at every, just imagine going down North Bay Shore Drive with your mail truck stopping at every mailbox.
Oh, so
Because
they
you would
walk
no
the
longer
route?
have,
No, you have to have, if you're downtown, Sister Bay, you have to have a PO box.
Oh,
if you're more than a certain.
I never
distance-
do that.
If you're more than a certain distance from the post office, they have to give you delivery, so once they get beyond that downtown area. It's not post office, it's mailboxes as
And you have to
well.
pay for the post office box, even though they
I
won't
didn't know
deliver it to you because you're downtown.
I didn't know that, okay, all right,
Yeah,
all right, well. I don't think we're gonna solve this tonight, but. The old shop closed got a lot of room. What? What'd you say?
I have Bertels.
that's what I was thinking.
Give Birdos to the village so we could put a post office in there?
No,
No,
it'd kind of be a horse apiece, whether you build one for 1.6 or,
well, that's true.
It's not the worst idea.
it is a horrible idea.
I disagree.
Yeah, you could go to a little, buy a power bar, get gas and go to the post office all at once.
Okay,
So really, as Adam was saying earlier, the only thing that really is going to make a difference in our mill rate is our capital projects levy of $1,089,000 or the general fund levy of $25,000. Those are the only categories that you can pull something from if you want the mill rate to go down. We worked hard at all the committees, and the finance gave a directive that it is a 0% increase. And everybody came through.
Chris, is everything in for fire the way you wanted it?
I think based on our conversation, yes,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, the big
We
fire
have-
expenditure is 27.
We haven't,
Yeah, it'll be out, yeah. It's in to be approved this year. The expenditure won't be till 27.
Yeah.
Because it's a 3-year bill.
Nate, I think we need to get some money put aside for the village hall, since we did not get that grant.
So what do we wanna? What are you proposing?
We need to get the ball rolling on that. $500,000.
$500,000 in 25, 26?
No, we haven't met, I don't know.
You're to the point where you need construction drawings, which is $200,000 maybe, $200,000 for the construction drawings, which will give you the final bid or on what the building would actually cost. We did have, you know, Robert E. Lee did give us a rough construction bid on that, but that was based on that project that also included telecenter and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So you need enough to get an actual construction bid in 25. And then you could stop until you know what that cost is and then put the actual construction cost in 26.
Yeah.
If they want to wait that long.
We could do that.
So,
So,
You automatically take out the 4.2 since you didn't get the grant then?
Right.
That's gone.
so then the other part of that comes out too, but that's what Patrice is saying, we should add something back in. Now.
But that will raise taxes
Yeah, but I mean, like,
substantially.
we have a flat mill rate.
if it goes into 26,
Patrice is talking for 25, the 200,000, the
oh,
100,000,
sorry.
200,000.
If you put 200 in, you have to put 200 out.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm looking at some of these projects we've already talked about. I'm looking at some that are left. I mean, you got dog park renovations, $50,000. I don't think people want to give that up. You know, you've got waterfront playground equipment. We've already pushed that off. That was $100,000 in 25 for the design. And 26 was 325,000 for the actual equipment. We know that has gone up every year. So playground equipment, dog park, 55,000 on the woodland trails, which was last year. We pushed it forward to this year. We only have 55 in there for the engineering on it. Then you go into the ice rink. You have 500,000 in there for basically, so they could have seed money to start a fund.
if they don't raise. the
For
cap-
them to raise the money, they needed to know that the village was committed to the project and had some skin in the game.
Yeah, I feel like we promised that.
So if they don't raise $500,000, they don't get $500,000, essentially. Right, how that goes.
Next one is marina, that's all user fees. That's not something we can really touch.
well, if we can't get it in 25, can we get it in 26, push it out a year? Just so that we get it in a plan.
You're asking for $200,000.
$100,000 for the first year, and then we're gonna need additional money the next year to start some of these, to fix some of the things like the ceiling that's all yellow and
Yeah.
weird carpeting and stuff. I don't know.
You know, you have a couple, we know we have a couple million. We know we have about almost 4 million. Just to repair what's there and put those restroom additions on. Put the lobby, redo the elevator, put the restrooms on the back, renovate what's there.
was almost $4 million, I think.
Is the, how much of that actually happen? Is there any of that that doesn't have to happen because to be grant eligible? You know, like, is there something that were added onto it because you had to?
That's taking that grant, that stuff out, you're right, so with the grant, we had to add some tele stuff in there. We took that out, that's taking that out,
So that's still 4 million?
almost 4 million.
And then is the marina funding part of it?
Bathrooms.
We told them that was the agreement or the
Yeah, how
discussion, but
much?
that's not in the budget yet, because we don't know what that would cost yet. Because we don't have the construction estimate, so we don't know what their portion of the bathrooms would be, but you're right, that would offset it if they have the money,
Right.
which after they're building, I'll be honest with you, I don't think they will.
You're right.
We did talk about how, you know, we're CDBG eligible now, that may, the village hall may be a good project for that. But usually you're gonna need some match funds on that anyway.
So when would we be able to apply for that?
Don't quote me, Louise, I think maybe it's May. That's in
So this year though, or
Yeah.
sorry, 25.
Yeah.
And if-
But we're not ready for that. We need to
Right.
do the construction drawings and figure out what it actually.
So no matter what, we need a couple $100,000 to get that done. Okay.
And some of the public works vehicles and equipment be pushed back?
We did.
We did.
They cut a lot out of the.
We cut a lot out of parks and pushed it forward. Lawnmower, second vehicle, they wanted replaced, lots of stuff.
And you can't touch the utility, you know, collection, water or waste, that's all done with their own user fees. I mean, that's, again, in enterprise funds, we can't take anything out of there.
So why don't we ask Vlad or Adam or whoever will do this then, is to create a new line and for 2026. Put in Village Hall and in the meantime. We'll have some conversations. But that affects nothing for next year.
Yeah, what we could do is we could add basically 2026 is the engineering and then 2027 would be the construction. And have that in there as an estimate, just so you can see it.
Okay.
Well, I think we need to have a discussion about the admin building. And whether it stays in 26 and what the price is, what the cost is. So if anybody else has, I mean, I think, you know how I feel, you know how Denise feels. I think we're both right. But, so we need to make some decisions there.
I think well, I haven't seen any of the plan other than what's in paper, but, I don't think 3 million is, I mean, everything costs so much money. I don't think that's asking for too much for a new administration building that. And it sounds like it's desperately needed, so I'm not sure if I approve of that exact picture, but I do think it's needed for this coming year after hearing everybody speak. You guys
I
need
agree,
it.
we need the offices. I just think there's a way to make it smaller and more, and a little bit more efficient and save a little money. You know, at the Parks meeting, actually, I was asking Mike McMahon, who worked with us, about maybe not doing this or not doing that. And what I was suggesting would have made no difference. They were just small, you know, little things. It would have to be a redesign.
Well,
Right, and we would have, we're done with our contract with McMahon, with Mike. So we would have to have a new contract. I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars that would be, do a redesign. Because he's completed his contract and.
I mean, the only way to, not the only way, but probably the way to make it smaller is to not have an atrium. And that would change the design of the building.
so
Look at it, with aesthetics, that would change.
I think it's important that we know that we're not approving that plan tonight. What we're talking about is that line item.
All right, I think
And
3
when,
million
so-
is probably what it's gonna cost.
I think it's gonna be more.
Yeah, and didn't the paper say 4 million?
I don't know where they would got 4 million.
I don't know where they would have either, because we didn't talk about that at Parks. ever. We're not 100% sure, but it could be more, yes.
But if we're building an admin building, yeah, I think we need to keep at least 3 million.
So the question would be when, and then what's that process look like?
So the Parks building, when did we pull the trigger on that?
About 5 or 6 months ago?
And when is it actually gonna start being constructed? And when do we, tomorrow?
The excavator shows up tomorrow.
Okay. So we're about.
We approved that in, June, we approved the contract, we signed the contract maybe about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So the excavator shows up tomorrow.
So when we were at this point with the Parks building, with the admin building, how long was that?
I think you're. Maybe about this time last year.
Okay, so if that, I mean, realistically, this isn't gonna start until fall of 25.
That depends on the building, the design, I mean, how long it takes to get those RFPs back. You know, with this particular building, remember when it went to Parks, they wanted more time to look over the bids, and so we had like an extra 2 to 3 month delay last year on that. So it could be summer. In summer.
So if
We want to avoid winter because that adds construction costs.
So if we leave it in 25 and it doesn't happen till 26. That's a wash from doing 25 or 26, is that correct? Let's just say we
Fall in 26, we pay in 26.
we pay in 26, so if we have it in 25 or 26, it's gonna have the same impact if we, just depends on when we.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we could run the analysis of, because you were planning for it in 25, so your first payments would be 26. So then we could analyze whether it makes sense to have you actually make payments in 26, or do we push it off to 27?
And will we do a construction loan and then bond, like just like we did for?
Similar process, yep.
So even then, the bonding for that probably doesn't happen until 26.
Right. I mean, it depends, right?
Okay.
Well, we just got the bond approved on Public Works building.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, today, and they're digging tomorrow, so, you know, that's kind of the timing
Yeah.
of it. To keep it moving along to get the best rates and.
I know sure you have the funds, so we probably look to try to do it. I mean, if you're doing it in 25, we try to get you the funds in 25, but we could look at that where, you know, if they're not gonna bill you anything till 26, well, then that's an option we can look at.
I think we should go forward and include the administration building in the CIP for 25, 26. The plan is, I mean, I personally think it's a little bit too big. I don't think we need an atrium. We can talk about all that stuff later. But then I don't like hearing that that contract is over and it's gonna cost us how many thousands of dollars to get a new architectural drawing, and how long is that gonna take, and our construction costs gonna go up again.
I mean,
So,
can we use McMahon again? I mean, maybe, you know, we can get it done for $25,000. If Parks can, at their next meeting, determine that the chambers in the meeting space is all okay, the office space is okay, get rid of the 1.5 story, forget the farmhouse feel. And be creative and just work there with that. And what does that look like? Because whatever, we don't want something modern, we never have, and we didn't want a concrete block building either. So if we could agree on the wings.
Yeah.
Then what do you do with the middle?
I don't know, but that's.
So
I'm
that
good
could
with
make
that.
it a lot less expensive.
And that also could be a question you could ask your engineers when you go out to bid, is could they do an alternate that you just alluded to, Denise, is if, you know, what is the cost for the full plan? And then what is the cost if you don't want X, Y, and Z? You know, that's one thing you can do with your bids, is you can.
Well,
ask
right,
them.
now that we've paid for
Now
it,
that,
we
right,
have it.
well, you have the plan, but when
Right.
you go out to bid, you can say, all right, we want you to do this, and then construction company, if you don't do this, and this, what's what do you take off your bid? I mean, we've done that, I did that with a bunch of projects when I was an administrator, so that's.
Did you do it to the extent where you like eliminate a whole?
So that's the engineering question you'd have to ask them, is if it's something that essentially is now, you know, if your atrium's in the middle of two parts of your building, that's probably not gonna be realistic.
I mean, we can ask McMahon.
But you can ask them.
We can ask McMahon too, what additional charge would there be
Right.
just to do that one revision?
Right.
The issue is, I'll be honest, Parks spent a lot of time debating stuff and chewed up the money. Chewed up the contract, because we only had so much time with them, so we would have to commit that one meeting, Mike, that's what we're paying for or whatever, because there's nothing budgeted to bring them back.
Well, I would
We could see some, well,
say that we do have an undesignated balance fund, and this board could make a motion to have a redraw done without the atrium up to $15,000 of undesignated funds right now.
Can we do that tonight? I mean, it's,
Wait, I'd like to see, I haven't even.
I'm
seen
not
these
saying
drawings.
necessarily tonight,
Yeah.
okay.
Next week when we have access to the full. I've only seen the paper. I don't know what I think of this building.
you'll be able to see the drawings on, well, in the packet, you don't,
Okay,
but, they're not like on paper, so you gotta go in and.
all right. Well, I'm not ready to say I need to redraw right this second.
It
Because
might
I
be
don't
revised,
know
so
the-
I have the revised ones for the board packet, so they'll be in the board packet.
Okay. I think we can talk about it after. the board,
Yeah,
if we
right.
need it.
I didn't mean now,
Okay.
right now, I meant.
Well, I think that's a
We
really
don't-
good.
We don't have to wait.
Yeah.
If, for that smaller amount of money, that we could expend that, if that was the wishes of the board to keep it moving forward. If that is the bone of contention.
Well, it's a good option, and, you know, Denise, you worked hard, and I know that you made a good point in the fact that essentially, you know, we're taking this space and moving it in with admin offices. You know, and I think the audience doesn't necessarily realize that it's very difficult for Heidi and Janelle to go from this building all the way over, you know, and set things up and move. If you ever planned a meeting in your life, you know, it's really nice to just walk next door, especially when you've got a lot of AV, and so it makes it a lot more efficient. And by the way, when they're doing this, you're paying for it. You know, and they deserve every penny of it, but the point is that it would make it efficient, and, you know, it's good to know those, you know, and Denise and I were at odds, believe me, for a couple months about this. But I think it's a good discussion, and I think it's one that we heard loud and clear from our constituents that we need to have, so. I think that's-
Right, I don't think the public knew that basically the things were the same size.
No, I would agree that
Just
they,
that it's all condensed together because
Yeah.
we're all scattered in multiple buildings trying to function.
no, it's 100%. All right, so,
Don't talk under your
I
breath.
know, talking under my breath, I was coughing. So,
So will you have that be an agenda item? Please, thank you.
I had a question about this, the sludge dryer. Do we need that sooner than 2026?
What page are you on?
I'm on page.
Yes, yes, you do.
page what?
Page 90. I mean, just seeing how much our utilities bill increased this past quarter.
You really do, and then your utility bill is gonna go up, because like I said, right now. They were hauling to Sturgeon Bay, now they have to haul to Green Bay. The problem is there's so much time that has to go into the engineering of it before they can actually build it. So where there's no way to push that up unless we were doing more land spreading, buying more land to
But-
spread it on.
And I
Let me,
issues with that. Well, when we talk about the land spreading.
yeah, you're still on utilities.
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't meet recently. I was trying to remember. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But we're talking, Are we talking about the $12 million sludge dryer?
Is that what it cost? I thought it was 608,000.
608,000, 12
Oh, this
million.
is the screw press.
What are we? The big drying
Screw
that
press
Megan,
for sludge dryer system.
Oh, yeah, we're not ready for that, Denise. We have to do engineering before we can do anything.
Oh, I thought this dryer
Okay, I
system
thought
was
this-
608,000.
it is, but when
But
it
we-
says for sludge dryer and Megan has been investigating not having to haul.
So it's $12 million, not 608,000. Oh,
Right.
got it.
Please don't all get worried. Lots of conversation.
So this is the first step in,
I don't know, I can't remember what this is from utilities.
this is a screw press,
Oh, well,
sludge
special-
dryer system, whatever the hell that is, okay. So you people can stop, just cut back once a day on,
No, wait, it says right here.
kidding.
It's also Liberty Girls.
Okay, well then if we.
So under the description, it says currently we're hauling all of our sludge to Sturgeon Bay for further treatment and land application. Now we're going to Green Bay. This was not updated. This is expensive and also not always dependable way to dispose of sludge. We are relying on when they have room for the sludge and not when we need to get rid of it. In the winter, we are not able to haul to Sturgeon Bay. If hauling is required in winter, we have to haul to Green Bay.
I thought Sturgeon Bay wasn't taking it any time of year anymore.
That's what I'm saying. I
Right.
don't think the justification on this page has been updated.
No, and Dan's mentioned in there too, but.
Okay, so this needs to be updated.
Right, so I guess I was thinking we could
Okay,
move
it's
it
under the description.
forward, but I guess this isn't even the sludge dryer I was thinking it was.
So that's the future. That's not even in the CIP nowhere yet.
2020, oh, no.
So far, the only change I heard was take the 4.2 million out because you didn't get that grant. Of course, if we get CDBG, we add back in. And then for 26, of course, we're gonna put in that road we talked 3 hours about.
Flint Bridge.
And then put in for 26 Village Hall Engineering. And then for 27, it would be the actual construction.
Right. Everybody agree? Will the Mill Road Triangle happen in 25?
Mill Road Triangle, part of it'll happen in 25.
It
And that's
also
all those
depends. That's also a key component of us vacating the administration building and realigning that road.
So the Mill Road Triangle is Mill Road East or West? Oh, the admin, sorry. So you're going up left side, okay.
Left side, Maple behind Husby's Parkview.
Yeah, it's a mess.
This the first chunk will be engineering and then down by Parkview.
Yeah.
And then next year it'll be going uphill.
So I have a question though,
But it's not enough money what's in there. That was grossly underestimated.
but also when is Goki, what's he doing with that stuff? Cause if he's gonna bring a lot of construction, big construction trucks through there while he's building that?
Yeah, that won't affect.
It won't. No, I mean, is it gonna wreck the road, That's all. I'm not sure what the status of that.
He'll be done before that, there's any work on that road.
Okay.
Does somebody want to make a motion to adopt that?
What's the motion gonna say, Heidi?
You have a resolution?
The resolution to approve, will be adopting the 25 to 29 Village of Sister Bay Capital Improvement Plan as presented and amended at this meeting.
And amended, okay.
Because you do have some amendments that need to be made.
But we don't need to say what they are.
Yeah, I have to list them.
You do, okay.
Just what Julie was done.
Yeah.
Okay, so moved.
Motion by Housing,
Second.
second by Harf. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Okay,
On to the second agenda item.
Number 3.
What page might that be on?
135.
Stick around.
discuss the pro housing grant application.
We discussed this yesterday and, I mean, this is the 3 takeaways from yesterday, and then we discussed this kind of earlier today. Or at this meeting, one is, when do we have to start the project? So this is close to what, 7 million that we're gonna get still? This is infrastructure for Woodsy. And so when do we have to start it?
And is there an answer to that question?
I don't know, you have to look at the rules or whatever.
Yeah, I meant to look at the grant application today and I just didn't.
I mean, they're out there, they tell you before you
I
apply.
don't know if I can vote for it if it says that we need to start it, like within a year of getting the grant.
I think it's later, but I don't know.
think it is, Allison. I think you have to start it by 2030.
Right, I think you got like 5 years. So we could do what we need that information. There's yesterday we talked about, there's some text in there that we're suggesting that, we have a builder that could build a home, a 3-bedroom home for $225,000. I'm not sure that that's, I know we don't know what we want yet, but I'm not sure that could happen. And then there was some data that Mike and I were like wondering if that was solid. You don't have to you don't have to provide data, with the grant. If they ask you, you give it to them. So.
Like,
Like
let
which
me explain
data,
that.
like-
She's talking not about data, she's talking about the source, the data.
The data source, I beg your pardon,
Which,
the data source.
The grant talks about ACS data and stuff like that. There is one part
what's
where
ACS?
American Community Survey data, that's that US Census data
Oh,
with kind of sent around about a year ago. That's been updated. But there was one section in there where we talk about disability, the number of people with ambulatory disabilities.
Mhm.
We talk about of that population, but it doesn't say ACS data again in the back. So he's like, make sure you guys have that source on there, on the data.
As long as we've got, I mean, Julie knows the HUD website better than most, as long as the data's there and it's.
well, I was curious about, oh shoot, my screen just went black. What about well, yeah, I had highlighted that assurance were given that his firm could build houses with a garage space between 225 and 250, but also, well, just that the plan noted the need for more roads as well, not just within the site, but to alleviate the potential congestion in the downtown area. We don't have those roads.
No, that would be why we write the grant. Because this is an infrastructure grant.
What's that?
Grant is for infrastructure.
Oh, for infrastructure. Oh, but we don't have an ability to build those roads. We don't have the land to build those roads. I mean, it's saying this, I'm looking at page, let me go to the top. Julie, thank you for all your hard work putting this together. It's like very difficult. So starting at the beginning of the executive summary, it says, we have low wages, leaving over half the population in poverty. 3/4 of adults struggle to pay rent. I was wondering where that data came from. And then I was trying to look up data and I found something saying that it was I was looking at the income, but it said it's something like 43. It said a bunch of households made less than $10,000 in our community, like a good portion. And I'm like, either people are not
Content of this grant, you mean?
reporting their income. I mean, it was like a ridiculous number. It said 46 households aged 25 to 44 made less than $10,000. I mean, either those people aren't looking for work, they're not reporting their tips, or they're not reporting their income. So I'm wondering where we're getting this data that we're,
It's American Community Survey data, it's the census data.
Okay, but is that real data or is that because people aren't reporting their income? I don't see half of our population in poverty. Or is it because everybody lives at Scant or a good deal of our population lives at Scant?
Actually, there's not that many at Scant to skew. We had Bay Lake look at the senior population at Scant to see how much that skewed the data, and it really wasn't that big of a deal. Because what we have seen is the senior population continues to increase. You know, we're now, 50%. We've seen the poverty, as this says, double in 2 years.
But is that, I would like to see their numbers or where they get these numbers, because when I looked it up, I'm like, this.
It depends where you're looking. So, you either have to go to the US Census Bureau American Community Survey data, or you have to go to HUD and look at the HAMP data, or you have to go to Wisconsin Department of Administration. Those are the three major sources throughout here, because those are the three that HUD uses as well, right?
Okay, so I guess there's data to back it up. I'm not sure if people are reporting
There's
income.
data. I think people are shocked at what they're hearing or reading though. If somebody's saying 10,000, it could be they're disabled, they're extremely poor, maybe they can't work.
Yeah, I mean, there was a significant, like 43 households out of our, we don't even,
1,200.
I'm sorry,
We have about 1,200.
and a bunch of what?
We have about 1,200, 43 out of 1,200.
Well, people, but not households. This is saying.
Oh, households, sorry. That's
That
not
was-
people.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just curious where that came from. I was worried about the arsenic. I tried to look up like what it takes to mitigate arsenic in soil, and it seemed like it's really expensive.
So
it
that
says-
was,
I'm sorry.
the arsenic, Allison, was, not part of that. That was when we had that housing study done and we just finalized that in January. The engineer at that time said, Bay Lake has money, as it says in here, Bay Lake has some grant money. I think we need to find out what's going on that property. And thank God he did, because we found out over 100 soil samples, every single one of them had lead, acceptable lead. And then a good chunk of it where we had originally, on the original subdivision design, where it showed apartment buildings and townhouses, that's where your arsenic is.
Yeah, so I mean, that worries me. And if it's like playground, or, I mean, if it's not having houses, what's
You
gonna
could do
happen there?
apartments.
What's that?
You could do apartments.
You can do
I
apartments?
think that's what you would suggest.
Yeah,
You can't do a playground, no.
Well, I know, that's what I'm wondering. If it's vacant, kids are just gonna be running around.
Right.
I think that's also an area that's kind of tough to serve, so I think what, at least our recommendation would be, this, the engineers and mine would be, is that becomes like a trailhead for that trail going around there, or extra parking. Because when you're looking at 45-foot wide lots, some with shared driveways, if that's what we do, there's not a lot of parking on site, so grandma comes to stay overnight, where does she park? She can't park on the street, so maybe that becomes like an overflow lot or something. I don't know, that's what we have to, as a board, have to
Parking
decide,
sounds
but
good.
it's not throughout the whole property though.
Says Village Board of Trustees begin witnessing residents were leaving and relocating to more affordable communities. Is that true?
Yeah, we've had someone just in the village ourselves.
I'm sorry?
We've had some in village staff
Oh,
alone, but yeah, I know Denise lost an employee, who moved to Sturgeon Bay.
I mean, people come and go, people move here. I mean, it's accurate to an extent.
in any case, I'm so nervous that that's gonna be crazy developed and
We need a plan.
terrible.
You are 100% right. We need a plan. You always need a plan. Especially for a site like this. It's 57 acres. I always say it's our last best chance. There's nothing left.
Yeah, I just do not want our population
Can't screw
to
this up.
double and I'm even nervous having my son ride on Scandia now. I can't imagine 1,000 more people trying to get out by Birdos and driving by my son trying to ride his bike up the hill there. I don't know, a little nervous.
Will we discuss this next week? At the meeting, board meeting?
I mean, the program, I wasn't gonna put it back on the agenda.
Okay.
We've got a lot of stuff to hit.
It did say that the public was given 15 days notice. Is that true?
I'm sorry, what?
Yep, this went to the paper 2 Fridays ago.
Oh,
So this
Yeah,
came
these are the
here because we happen to have this meeting and,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, it dropped, the Biden administration did one round, it was very popular. And they awarded 25 communities. And then they decided they did more. And I think this round will be, it's $100 million total. The ceiling is 7 million and the floor is 1 million. So no one can get less than 1 million, but no one can get more than 7. And so actually Milwaukee got something the last go around, and there are a couple of resort communities that got stuff out west. Bend, Oregon got something, and so did Ketchum, Idaho. Anyway, I think they're gonna give away, I think at this round, it's like 35 or so more. Because, well, no kidding, people needed it.
35 million?
No, 35 individual.
Or 35
awards.
individual grants.
Yeah. Not a lot considering, but I guess the response was overwhelming the first time.
I wish we had more time to go over this. I
Yeah.
mean, but this is a short turnaround.
It's do or
on it.
die, we've got to apply or
Yeah,
not.
we have to apply. I would like to understand the statistics on the low income breakdown, and that's gonna be, we'll discuss in time, Julie. Because that doesn't seem quite right. So just, you and I can walk through that to see where that is. You can just take me through that. But for this, if we get awarded this, we still need to figure out, because free money is not free. I've been part of many grant awards, and when you get it, it may be that the hooks on it are too great. I mean, the administrative burden is usually pretty great when it comes to the federal government. So just because we get the award, this doesn't mean we're going to do it. But we should try.
I think we need to definitely try and, get this grant applied for. And just kind of show the community that we do care. We're trying to provide some type of housing for them housing. I am not in favor of 1,000 more people over there. I mean, I just think we need to put something small, medium.
I mean,
So
we can't,
make
but
an
our
effort.
residents know what we're planning? I mean, do
No,
all these people who are here, do they want 800 people?
We
up
don't
there?
have a plan
You're
yet.
not gonna have 800 people there.
But that's what it's saying here. I did the conservative math. So if you estimated 3 people per house, 2 people per townhome and rental apartment, that's 826 people. And that's, you could have 4 people per house, you could have a lot more people per townhome and apartment. So conservatively, it was 826 people.
How did you end up at 100 and something? Wasn't that kind of a
That's-
double requirement on this?
It's the demand pool that the Stantec did the demand pool and they ran their calculations with their economists. And they came up with the 140. And they also came up with the numbers in here that looks at the total number of people that would be. Now, they're not all gonna be on this property, right? Some are gonna go on the Northwoods property by corner Ava Hope and Northwoods. That apartment complex will take, I don't know, maybe 30 people out of the mix.
We're down to
So,
810.
but if everybody they projected needed housing. Just went to that property alone, you'd have 140 single-family homes, 60 townhomes, 18 single-family rental homes, 36 townhome rental homes, and 80 rental apartments.
Which is right, that's a lot of people.
Right,
but-
that's where I just did my math and came up conservatively with 826 people. And then I remember at a different meeting, I was asking, who is this for? Because I could see, with all these people, we need help for teachers, medical people, the daycare staff. I'd love it if all those people could have affordable housing. Except then I was told it was just for Sister Bay people. So I'm like, where are these Sister Bay people who need?
I don't think those parameters have been discussed.
Well, that's what I was told at the last meeting, that we couldn't take care of everybody, that we're just trying to take care of Sister Bay.
That was public comment that was saying that. I mean, like, we can focus on that, but if we, somebody that is in Sister Bay is, once they move to Sister Bay, they're from Sister Bay.
I know what you're talking about. We were talking about the demand pool and how it serves a larger area more than Sister Bay. And we had a trustee say we should only be worried about Sister Bay.
Yeah, and saying that we can't take care of everybody, and then I'm like, okay, well, who are all these Sister Bay people? Who are, and then there's a question of who can actually afford these places, because still 250,000 is expensive.
Yeah, we talked about this last
I
night.
mean, all of this is.
Essentially, you know, they can afford $1,000 a month if you're making 50 grand a year. And you want 25% of your income to come to be for housing. That's it. That's what they can afford. That's not a 3-bedroom.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a studio or a 1-bedroom, and builders now do not build studios and they do not build 1-bedrooms. Unless a community says to them, here's the ground, here's the land, here's the ground, here's the infrastructure. You're gonna build this, and this is what it's gonna cost. And that's what you have to work on. That's what's happening in, to the best of their ability. Maybe not so much Sturgeon Bay, but there's a little bit of that happening in Fish Creek. It's a little more expensive than that, but that's what has to happen.
and then we have 20 years of building. And again, it was such a nice morning. I was out walking at Anderson Pond. And I don't know where they were building. It was not close, but it was so loud. And that just made me think, if we're gonna be building for 20 years here, it's gonna be so loud.
Well,
There was one piece of equipment they were using. I don't even know what they were using. It wasn't like a whole big knocking a building down. It was like one, I don't even know what it was.
It depends on what they're doing. And we live across the old golf course from the show, from the Cove. And they're in the tail end of 16 fairly sizable homes. And sometimes it's a little noisy and sometimes it's not. It depends.
But this is like 20 years of building. This goes to 2043.
I know. Yep.
That is us listening to construction. Oh, this does not sound pleasant for any resident of Sister Bay.
And
Who's
I
gonna be
don't
funding
view it
this?
that way, Allison, because they're gonna come in and they're gonna build in bulk, right? They're gonna do, let's say they're gonna do 10 this summer. They're gonna come in, you're gonna hear that excavator do their 10 excavating for their 10 slabs. Then you're gonna hear those concrete trucks come in and they're gonna do their concrete on 10 slabs. Then you're gonna hear hammers pounding on 10 buildings and that's it. And then they go inside. So you're doing, instead of doing a house now, 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 you know, you're coming in, you're doing them in bulk, you're doing them all at once and getting it out of the way.
In
which
any
is how you
case,
keep the cost down.
we can, and if you guys all want to vote for it, I don't think.
It's not that I think that we are all in agreement that even Denise, not even Denise, but Denise agrees as well, that the housing committee is tasked with doing some research, coming back to the board with the very best model that will suit the property and that will suit what the vision is and what the need is for the village. It's not going anywhere until the village board says, okay.
We have this, I mean, there's no motion for this.
No.
So
It's whether, can we write the grant? Okay.
Well, yeah, it's on here to get feedback, you know, which Allison did and I took notes.
But feedback to the grant, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I have to include public comments. So if somebody gives comment, we want the comment. And then we have to include those comments at the back of it and then try and address it.
Okay. Did you get any public comment from when was like anything emailed to you?
Yeah, I thought of it, yeah.
Good, good.
So even, let's just say somehow we get this awarded, then we have a whole lot more questions to figure out. And then we've really got to nail things down. We're not committed. Just because we get a grant award, it doesn't mean we have to take it.
You don't
although
have
I
to use
think
it, yeah.
we'd be likely to, but we don't know all the answers. And just how the timeline on this, it wasn't practical to know all the answers.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's part of what that Will See money is for too, is to continue to work on a design. What does that design of that property even look like?
Right.
You know, they did a conceptual design. That's before we knew about the arsenic. That's before we knew that we couldn't serve all of the property. You know, because you can't develop all of it. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Consensus wise, I'm okay with moving forward with writing the grant, and I think that's what we're here to get consensus on.
Well, we got public comments or? 100%. Then last thing on here is committee appointments. I finally got 2 more people to agree to be on the parking committee. Thor Johnson and Mike Laskowitz.
Thor. Who else is on it?
Don Cox and
Don
myself.
Cox, right?
I think you should get whoever said before that we need to charge for parking on them. They might be a good person.
Yeah.
It was Mickey?
Oh, it was me.
Or,
No, it was Bridget.
It's Bridget.
Bridget, maybe
Yeah.
Bridget was right on there.
Would you like to reach out to me?
I don't know her.
I know her.
Yeah, well,
How many do we need? What does it say we need on there?
we have enough for,
Minimum of 4.
Yeah, so we can actually,
have four
we can
now.
always add more people, and if somebody wants to show
Who's the chair? You.
up.
Need a motion.
Yeah, can I get it?
So the, let me see, a motion to appoint Mike Laskowitz and Thor Johnson to Sister Bay Village Parking
Task Force.
Task Force, sorry. And this task force will be in existence for, is there a length of time?
12 months, was it?
12
Good,
months
that's it.
from when they appointed Don and Nate. So they
When was that?
May, June?
Okay, well, get going.
Yeah.
Do you want Bridget on it as also? Should I ask her? Do you need more people?
Give me,
Okay,
give me one moment here.
okay, I wasn't sure if that was a
I don't, I mean,
request.
yeah, so, okay, so there's you make a motion?
I made the motion.
Motion by Housen,
I second that.
second by Champo, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, okay?
Now you can discuss it.
No, now let's adjourn.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Motion.
Did you make the motion? I'd like to make a motion to join.
I'll join.
Motion by
Adjourn this
Housen,
meeting. Yeah.
is that a second by Hart?
Yeah.
Second,
Yes.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.